Chapter 81. With just a moment's hesitation, the tunnel behind him was filled with earth energy, and a strange rune formation could be faintly seen on the floor. Immediately, two tall figures appeared from the rune formation. It was a teleportation spell, not an underground tunnel. Grimm's eyes flashed with a blue light. With just a glance, he was able to discern the method of the newcomer. Although the opponent was using a teleportation spell, he could not sense any traces of spatial fluctuations. Instead, Earth origin force filled the air, as if this teleportation spell was powered by Earth origin force. However, this was not the time to stop and study it. There were pursuers behind him and an ambush in front of him. The situation was worrying. "You marry, right?" One of the two behind her slowly walked forward and spoke coldly. "Very well. The two who killed Gerald are both here today. I'll extract your souls and imprison them in the soul-binding corpses for tens of thousands of years." It was a tall and handsome noble youth. His light blue robes flickered with dazzling runes in the darkness, and a terrifying frost energy began to spread throughout the tunnel. "Gerald? Who's that?" Mary could not make heads or tails of the situation. If the name Gerald sounds unfamiliar, then what about the Devil Vine Girl? The noble youth's handsome face began to contort, his expression strange and sinister. The Devil Vine Girl! The Devil Vine Girl! Grimm and Mary exclaimed at the same time. They could not help but feel that this was not an undeserved calamity. An enemy had actually come knocking on their door. Looking at his age, it was very likely that he was the Devil Vine Girl's partner. This was going to be fun. What is the soul-binding corpses he mentioned? Mary could not help but ask in a low voice. It's a type of undead creature. It's made from a living person. Before the enemy dies, draw a special witchcraft circle on their body. That way, when the enemy dies in the sacrificial ritual, their soul will be imprisoned in an immortal body, becoming an eternal slave of the caster. Grimm quickly replied. With the help of the AI chip, Grimm had a terrifying photographic memory of many basic knowledge and obscure subjects in the Magus world. The noble youth strolled forward and added on his behalf. "What you said is only the lightest punishment. After all of you become soul-binding corpses, I will find a deserted place underground and bury you. I will let you suffer in silence and darkness for 100 years while you are conscious. Don't worry, I will visit you from time to time. I guarantee that your souls will always be intact and your memories will always be clear. You won't be able to go crazy even if you want to." Ha ha. Ugh. Grimm could not help but feel a chill run down his spine. He felt that he had underestimated the evil and madness of the enemy. "Which way?" Mary whispered to him while he was still laughing wildly. "In front," Grimm replied in a low voice. "There are two quasi-sorcerers behind them. I can only sense a soul aura in front, so I can only force my way through." "All right." As soon as the two of them finished speaking, Grimm's body burst into flames and a flame shield appeared around him. Mary hugged Grimm, and the two of them intertwined their bodies tightly. Without any hesitation, she threw herself into the lightning net. "You still want to run?" The noble in blue roared, and his body suddenly expanded several times. A giant hand, covered in bristles, viciously grabbed at the two of them. Without the slightest hesitation, the two of them plunged into the lightning storm like a pair of sharp arrows. The giant hand of the noble in blue barely managed to grab the two of them. As soon as the tip of his finger touched the lightning net, the paralyzing electricity scorched it black. After the pain, the noble in blue roared and retracted his giant hand. The hand that was as thick as a stone pillar returned to normal in a blink of an eye. However, there was a burn mark between his fingers, and there was a faint black smoke coming out. "Damn it, Hegel! Get rid of your lightning trap." The noble in blue roared loudly, but the target of his roar was obviously not in front of him. As soon as Grimm and Mary entered the net of lightning, the rampaging electric currents found them. Of course, the first to bear the brunt of it was the flame shield that Grimm had summoned. The raging electric arcs splashed dazzling sparks on the flame shield. The terrifying electricity that was enough to burn an ordinary person into charcoal made the shield crackle. The lightning energy was so dense that it had condensed into a terrifying blue plasma that floated less than a meter away from Grimm's head, slowly drifting about. A normal flame shield's defense was only 35 points, but Grimm had an affinity with fire, so the flame shield that he summoned increased its defense to 50 points. However, it was still not enough to protect them through the short distance of less than 10 meters. 10 meters. With Mary's extraordinary agility, the distance of 10 meters could be covered in the blink of an eye. However, at this moment, it seemed so long and dangerous. The flame shield disappeared before it could cover half of the distance. The high-temperature plasma that had accumulated outside rushed in, and it would take less than half a finger to turn Grimm into a wisp of green smoke. Mary's physique was much higher than Grimm's, so she had a great chance of surviving the second half of the lightning journey. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. Just as Grimm's body trembled and he was about to close his eyes and wait for death, Mary suddenly shouted. Waves of blood surged out of her body and instantly enveloped the two of them. No matter how pure the blood origin energy was, it could not withstand the violent and ferocious scorching plasma. The two of them were like fresh meat roasted on a fire, and the blood origin energy that lingered around them was instantly evaporated and devoured countless times. In the end, the thin blood source force could not completely protect the two of them. Mary gritted her teeth and moved most of the remaining blood source force to Grimm's side, exposing most of her body to the electric current and plasma. Squeak! The terrifying sound of roasting flesh and blood could be heard. Mary's exposed body was immediately charred, and then turned into ashes that fluttered in the air. On the other side of the narrow passage, a short gnome was staring at everything in front of him with his mouth agape. Of course, he had seen everything that had happened in the lightning net clearly. But even though he had seen it with his own eyes, he still could not believe what he had seen. There was actually someone who dared to barge into his lightning trap. How was this possible? But whether he believed it or not, this scene had happened. And right in front of him, there was a soft pop, and a large mass of charred black things rushed out of the lightning net and fell heavily to the ground. Little guy, you're quite tenacious. That's good too. Langdon will owe me 2 big favors in a while. The short gnome was thin and ugly, but he was a real human. At this moment, when he saw that 2 prey had unexpectedly bumped into him, he immediately bent down to grab them with great joy. In his palm, a fine and gentle lightning glove was clearly visible. Any living thing that was touched by this paralyzing lightning would not be able to stand up on its own for a quarter of an hour. Bada! With a soft sound, a crystal-clear, elemental crystal core fell to the floor. The dwarf was slightly taken aback. He was about to pick it up, but before he could get close, a thick cloud of earth elemental smoke enveloped him. Oh, what is this? The gnome's curiosity was piqued. At this moment, Langdon's loud roar came clearly from the other side of the lightning net. Just as the gnome was hesitating whether to catch the 2 first or turn off the lightning trap, there was a sudden loud rumble in the area shrouded by the earth elemental smoke. A behemoth had burrowed out of the ground, coiled around its thick body, and pounced fiercely at him. A rock-like body, a rock-like snake head, a snake's tongue, and fangs. This is a rock python. The gnome disappeared on the spot in a flash, and when he reappeared, he was already behind a rock peak 20 meters away. And where he had been, the rock python's terrifying, hard, fanged mouth slammed into the rock floor. In an instant, the earth cracked, the rock formation shook, and the entire cavern collapsed in the rapid turbulence. The rock python pulled its head out of the floor and raised its body again. Its earth-yellow eyes instantly locked on the gnome, not far away, and it charged violently again. Damn it, what the hell is this? Startled, the dwarf stomped his feet and cursed. He rubbed his hands together, and the violent and turbulent lightning struck the python's head, firmly holding it back. The wantonly splashing electric current burned the rock python's head, and even its hard rock skin began to melt like hot wax under the extreme heat. However, the giant rock python relied on its thick skin and didn't care about such a small loss. It continued to charge forward. Left with no choice, the gnome could only use lightning to jump elsewhere. Hegel, what the hell are you doing? Hurry up and turn off the lightning trap. On the other side of the passage, Langdon heard the earth-shattering explosion and became more and more violent and impatient. For a long time, Langdon did not get a response from his companion. His bloodshot eyes widened, and he turned around and shouted, "Felix, can you teleport me there?" Felix, who was following behind him, held onto his long staff and focused his senses. He shook his head and said, "The changes in the terrain there are very violent, and the aura of the ley line is unstable. There is no way to form a stable ley line node." Damn it, the enraged random could not wait any longer. With a roar, his body once again expanded into a 3-meter-tall little giant. A set of crystal-clear blue armor condensed around his body, and then he plunged into the electric net in a frenzy. Violent electric currents wreaked havoc outside his body, and the blue plasma bubbles gnawed at the ice crystal armor until it was badly damaged. But he covered his face with both hands, and with a constant flow of the power of ice, he resisted the attack of the lightning and strode out of the electric net. In front of him was a broken and twisted passage. The cavern that used to be there no longer existed, only a broken ruin left after a great battle. A huge rock python was lying on the ground, its 30-meter-long body filled with thick, pungent black smoke. The place where the snake's head used to be had been replaced by a pool of fiery red, flowing lava. A sparkling earth-yellow crystal core flashed a few times and finally dimmed. The gnome was crouching near the snake's head, looking for something. "Where are the enemies I asked you to intercept? Where are those two bastards?" Langdon, who had transformed into a small blue giant, roared wildly. "Aren't they over there?" The gnome turned around and pointed. "Huh, where did they go?" Chapter 82. In the mud, the crocodile hunter moved quickly. Ever since it passed through the lightning trap, the disturbance to the earth elemental energy had disappeared. To save his life, Grim had to give up on the rock python and let it deal with the terrifying lightning element Quasimagus. He secretly summoned the crocodile hunter and escaped with Mary. Mary was now more like a pile of charcoal that had been dug out from a fire than a person. Her skin had been charred, and the slightest touch would cause countless ashes to fall. After the charcoal was peeled off, the steaming hot flesh and tendons were revealed. It was obvious that the high temperature from the violent electricity had killed most of Mary's bones and flesh. If it were a normal person, they would have died a long time ago. However, Mary was indeed a bloodline acolyte. Her vampire bloodline gave her the strange property of having an indestructible heart core and an indestructible soul. In this mess of charcoal and cooked meat, a weak soul aura could still be felt. AI, Chip, scan Mary's condition and provide the most reliable treatment plan. Although Grim's heart was trembling, his tone was still calm and steady. "Beep, status, scan initiated. Warning, target's flesh is less than 7%. Heart core has been damaged. Warning, target's life aura is still deteriorating. If we don't intervene in time, heart core will be destroyed. Don't talk so much nonsense. Just tell me the most feasible treatment plan." Grim interrupted impatiently. "Blood, a lot of blood. The target has the constitution of a vampire. As long as there's enough blood, even if her entire body is destroyed, as long as her heart core comes into contact with fresh blood, she can be reborn from it. Blood." Grim shook his head and scolded himself for being stupid. Mary was a vampire, if not blood. Then what could he use to save her? Immediately change directions and find an area with the most abundant subterranean creatures. Quick! Half an hour later, the crocodile hunter's huge body suddenly emerged from the ground at a gathering place of green-skinned gnomes. Green-skinned gnomes were a subspecies that resembled humans, with an average height of 1 meter. Their green skin was as tough as cowhide, and they had a pair of wide ears like a donkey's. Their diet was so wide that it could cover all organic substances. It could be said that in the underground world, apart from rocks and soil, almost everything else was in their diet. Because their individual strength was too weak, they developed the habit of living in groups. In the underworld, the green-skinned gnomes were at the bottom of the food chain, but they were the most widespread and numerous. Their biggest characteristic was that they could eat anything, and they were especially good at eating raw food. Logically speaking, such weak creatures didn't deserve to survive, but they could be found in every region of the underworld. The reason for this was very simple. Food was scarce in the underground world, and it was very difficult to find a stable source of food. That was why the green-skinned goblins were like a flock of sheep. Once they couldn't find food to fill their stomachs, they would barge into the green-skinned goblin settlement and eat one or two to fill their stomachs. To be honest, the flesh and blood of these green-skinned goblins were sour and tough, and they had a stench that was difficult to get rid of. Therefore, unless they were extremely hungry, the underground creatures were not willing to torture their stomachs. Perhaps this was the main reason why the green-skinned goblins would never go extinct. But today, the green-skinned goblins of this group were out of luck. In a narrow cave, more than 100 green-skinned goblins were gathered in the camp to cook food. The camp was so simple that it was hopeless. Other than the scattered gravel, there were countless holes dug out from the mud. The only tent was just a wooden stick with a piece of cloth that was so dirty that its original color couldn't be seen. And it was this tent that even the vagrants of human society were unwilling to step into, but it was the greatest manifestation of the green-skinned goblin leader's personal status. It should be dinner time for the green-skinned goblins. All the goblins who went out to hunt had returned one after another. They were chattering noisily as they threw the geckos and small insects they brought back into the huge stone pot in the middle of the camp. The bonfire was burning, and the turbid and dirty soup in the stone pot was green. Countless strange objects were tumbling and floating in it. There were bones of unknown origin, pieces of meat with strange colors, sharp magic beast teeth, shelled insects rolling and hissing, and horrifying pale eyes. 2 or 3 green-skinned goblins stood on a high platform, using wooden sticks to stir the stone pot, causing the unknown substances at the bottom of the pot to tumble up. It was this pot of flesh and blood stew filled with poisonous substances, but it was the food that all the green-skinned goblins yearned for the most. Countless goblins gathered around the bonfire with stone bowls in their hands, pushing and shoving each other for a spot in the front row while waiting for the arrival of the leader. As the leader of the goblins, he naturally had the right to enjoy the food first. Thus, amidst the chaos of the demons, the demon crocodile hunter barged in. Grim carried Mary out of the demon crocodile and looked coldly at the ugly scene in front of him. He said in a low voice, "Kill them all." After saying this, he walked to the side without a care. After finding a slightly cleaner place, Grim gently placed Mary on the ground. With just this slight movement, Mary's pitch-black body was reduced to countless ashes. Grim pulled out a dagger from his waist and stabbed it into Mary's chest without hesitation. Cutting open the half-cooked flesh, Grim did not care about the rising heat waves. He used his hand to pry open the flesh, revealing the dying heart under the chest. This was Mary's heart, as well as her consciousness core. It could be said that as long as the consciousness core was still there, even if the rest of the body was damaged, it could still be reborn through blood. After exposing Mary's heart, Grim did not hesitate to cut his wrist. As soon as the dripping blood fell on the shriveled heart, it brought a trace of vitality. The originally yellowish-white, withered flesh instantly turned bright red. Tiny blood vessels spread out from the flesh like branches, growing and extending crazily. They quickly formed a thin layer of blood membrane that wrapped around the heart. As Grim's blood continued to drip, the membrane continued to extend outwards, extending the tentacle-like blood vessels to the surrounding parts of Mary's body. At a speed visible to the naked eye, Mary's heart returned to normal. Blood continued to drip. Every drop of blood that fell on the heart would be absorbed into it in the shortest time possible. Finally, with a soft thud, Mary's heart began to beat again. Blood. I want more blood. Mary's charred lips split open, revealing the dark red flesh underneath. Mary's thirsty cries could be heard from her mouth. His blood was far from enough. Still not done? Grim growled in a low voice. At this time, the gnome camp was already in a bloody mess. The demon crocodile had skillfully used an earthquake spell to collapse the entrance of the cave. It was swaying its huge body and wantonly slaughtering the green-skinned monsters with its earth spears. The aborigine centipede had separated from the demon crocodile and was striding to Grim's side. The long earth spears in its hand were pierced by two green-skinned gnomes. With a light swipe of its hand, a pit half a meter deep appeared. The aborigine centipede tore apart the bodies of the gnomes and threw them to the edge of the pit. As large amounts of blue blood gushed out from the broken bodies of the gnomes, the bottom of the pit gradually became wet and muddy. The demon crocodile was in charge of the slaughter, while the aborigine was in charge of letting out the blood. It only took a few minutes for the pit to be filled with blue blood. At this moment, there was a tall pile of corpses at the edge of the pit. Strangely shaped corpses of gnomes could be seen everywhere. Grim carefully moved Mary's slightly recovered body into the blood pool. As Mary's body was swallowed by the blue blood, the bubbling sound caused the blood pool to boil. The water level of the blood pool began to drop. "Hurry up, we need more blood." Under Grim's urging, more goblins were thrown to the side of the pond. The flowing blue blood converged into a blood spring that continuously flowed into the pond. Only then was Mary able to replenish the goblin's energy consumption. After a quarter of an hour, there was a soft splash. Blood splattered everywhere, and the blue blood surged. A naked and perfect female body flew out of the blood pool and floated in the air. Mary, who had just resurrected, was clearly a little confused. Her green eyes suddenly opened and blankly looked around. A layer of sparkling and translucent luster flowed on her delicate and fair skin. Her delicate body was exquisite and translucent, charming and alluring. After blinking her eyes and thinking for a moment, Mary finally regained her memories. You're Grim? I'm Mary." In just a few seconds, the old Mary had returned. "Damn it! Why did you use such filthy blood to resurrect me? Bastard! Don't you know that I hate the blood of these lowly creatures the most?" Before Grim could greet her, Mary sniffed her body and started to complain in a shrill voice. Well, Grim had to admit that he did not know much about the vampires, especially the terrifying combination of a vampire and a woman. It was a mysterious species that was hard to fathom. "Welcome back." "Thank you." Grim stepped forward and bowed with sincerity. His words also contained two layers of meaning, and only the two of them could fully understand the meaning behind it. In the previous battle, if Mary did not have to protect the fragile Grim, she could have easily broken through the lightning trap with minimal damage. However, she chose to protect Grim with all her might, which caused her to suffer even more serious injuries. Even her mind core was on the verge of shattering. If Grim did not feel touched by this, then he would really be a stone man with a heart of stone. However, as an acolyte who needed to be calm and emotionless at all times, he preferred to hide his feelings deep in his heart and only take them out when he was lonely. Chapter 83. In response to Grim's gratitude, Mary was dismissive. Following her soft snort, the remaining blood in the blood pool surged upwards and transformed into a beautiful and gorgeous red dress that wrapped around her body. However, just as Grim recalled the crocodile and was about to return to the wizard tower, Mary, who had just recovered, suddenly turned her head and stared at a certain direction with her green eyes. What's that?" Grim was slightly startled. He followed her gaze and saw a yellow and green rock that was 1 meter in diameter in the middle of the camp. A rock. Grim looked around. The whole camp was filled with scattered sand and pebbles. He had never seen a large rock. Now that a rock had suddenly appeared around the only tattered tent in the middle of the camp, it was indeed strange and abrupt. Grim had been focused on saving Mary, so he did not pay much attention to his surroundings. Now that he sensed something strange, he used his elemental sight. Under his elemental sight, which could see through all elements of the plane, Grim's handsome face twitched. Damn, how is this a rock? It's clearly Grim, who had been deceived by the enemy due to his carelessness, snapped his fingers in anger. The earth and Grim immediately strode towards the rock. Obviously, it knew that it had been exposed. Before the earth and Grim's spear could reach it, the rock disintegrated. In fact, it did not disintegrate. A green-skinned goblin that was only 1 meter tall took off his cloak and revealed his true appearance. "Spare me, my lord. Great sorcerer, spare my life. Please spare the cabby beast. It's fine even if the cabby beast is willing to be your slave. Please don't kill my Kirby." As soon as the green-skinned goblin revealed his true appearance, he fell to the ground and kowtowed as if he was pounding garlic with his head. Now, wait a minute. Grim stopped the earth and Grim. You can actually speak the human language? How can low-level creatures like goblins have intelligence? My lord, my Kirby is not an ordinary goblin. Cabby beasts were the smartest goblins in the world. They could serve you tea and rice, make your bed, and even guard your door. The cabby beast is the most capable. As soon as he heard that the young devil in front of him was actually interested in him, the green-skinned goblin immediately worked hard to promote himself. What was that move you used just now? If this lord's eyes were sharp, I would have almost been deceived by you. That's the disguise and transformation spells that I secretly learned. Please excuse me, my lord. You know witchcraft? Grim's expression became even more shocked. You actually know 2 types of witchcraft. I actually know 3 types of witchcraft. The goblin who called himself Cabby stammered. 3? What's the other one? Grim felt like the world was spinning. A little green-skinned gnome could master 3 witchcraft, and he seemed to have only mastered 4 until now. No, that flame spear was just a variant of flame arrow witchcraft. Therefore, in all honesty, he had only mastered 3 spells. Not knowing the complicated thoughts in the young apprentice's mind, the cabby beast lowered its head and said softly in embarrassment, I also know an invisibility spell." Grim was completely speechless. A green-skinned gnome that was regarded as the weakest monster in the continent also had intelligence and mastered 3 witchcraft. What was this? Invisibility spell, disguise spell, transformation spell. An expert in hiding. If not for Grim's elemental vision and Mary's ability to detect its life force, this little guy, called Cabby Beast, might have been able to escape today's calamity. Grim muttered to himself as he rubbed his chin. Just as he was considering how to deal with this strange goblin that was rarely seen in 100 years, the Cabby Beast was clearly frightened by his expression. It hurriedly pointed to the heavens and drew the earth, revealing an even greater inside story. "My lord, please don't kill Cabby Beast. Cabby Beast knows the secret treasure of a wizard. Cabby Beast can take you there." If there was anything else that could move Grim today, it would be this sentence. Grim's eyes narrowed, and he gritted his teeth and said coldly, "It seems that you are a magic servant that escaped from a wizard tower. Tell me, which wizard tower did you escape from?" He was suddenly enlightened. How could a gnome in the wild suddenly awaken basic intelligence? And even if it did, how could it come into contact with a mysterious and profound knowledge of witchcraft? Therefore, combining these clues, Grim dared to conclude that this must be a magic servant that accidentally escaped from a wizard tower. Moreover, it was a magic servant that belonged to an official wizard. That Cabby Beast hesitated for a long time, its small and nimble eyeballs spinning around in its eye sockets. However, the sharp spear of the native devil was pressing down on its shoulder, and it had no chance of escaping. Perhaps feeling that there was no hope if it didn't confess, the Cabby Beast finally said a name dejectedly. "Blissful City, Lord Wizard Prydica." Prydica of Blissful City? This name sounds so unfamiliar. Grim, have you heard of him? Mary asked with a puzzled expression. Grim's face was cold as he squeezed out a sentence from between his teeth. "Mary, you really should go to the library more often. Understanding the enemy is the best way to protect ourselves. Is this Prydica very famous?" Of course he's famous. That's because this Prydica is a rank 2 magus. Grim spat out the last sentence word by word. Hearing this, Mary sucked in a breath of cold air. Even though Mary was usually unbridled and unbridled, there was still a limit to her arrogance and despotism. When facing an official magus, she would not be as reckless as she usually was. Instead, she would sincerely offer her respect. This was because she knew that this was a terrifying existence that could kill her with a flip of his hand. As for a rank 2 magus, that was a terrifying existence that even official magi would tremble in fear when facing. Mary and Grimm looked at each other and instantly understood each other's intentions. This cabby beast must be in their hands. My goodness, this was a little gnome that had once served a rank 2 magus. Any bit of magic knowledge or special information they could dig out from its mouth would be enough for the two of them to drink to their heart's content. As for the magus treasure that the cabby beast kept mentioning, the two of them had forgotten about it after hearing it and did not care about it at all. Did he really think they were fools? Would such a terrifying rank 2 magus reveal the secret of his treasure to a green-skinned gnome? This was simply a mockery of the great magi's wisdom and knowledge. This cabby beast had probably treated the waste that the magi casually threw away as a treasure. Grimm climbed up the magic crocodile with endless conjectures. He carried Mary and the cabby beast gnome before diving underground once again. Inside the broken tunnel, 3 figures of different heights crouched in front of the collapsed remains of the giant rock python, silently inspecting everything in front of them. The broken crystal core that had lost its elemental fluorescence was raised high in the hands of the quasi-wizard Felix, who was turning it around and examining it. "How is it? What did you see?" The short quasi-wizard Hegel yawned and asked impatiently. "You've been looking for half an hour. Haven't you found anything out of the ordinary? This is an elemental crystal core taken from the body of a quasi-wizard earth giant spirit." Felix thought for a long time and gave his opinion in a deep voice. "Nonsense. Everyone can see that. If that's all we need, we wouldn't need an earth element master like you to come out and comment." Hegel's tone was somewhat unfriendly. Langdon, on the other hand, stood silently to the side, his eyes cold. Clearly, he was still angry at the enemy for escaping. There are a total of 14 special runic arrays etched on it. Most of them are runic arrays for absorbing and storing earth energy, while the rest cover life bestowing, elemental summoning, willpower imprinting, and elemental tempering, among other aspects. All of these independent rune circles are then linked together through a special method, forming a new 3-dimensional spell formation. That's why this rock python was able to display such shocking might and actually tied down a quasi-shaman to the point that he couldn't escape. Hearing the sarcasm in Langdon's tone, the short Hegel was instantly enraged. "Damn it, how can you blame me for this? You only told me to stand guard here and stop a senior apprentice and a beginner apprentice from leaving, but you didn't tell me that he had such a big thing in his hands. Hey, Felix, with your knowledge of witchcraft, is it reasonable for a beginner apprentice to be able to control a quasi-wizard puppet? He's already an intermediate apprentice now. All right. Even if he's an intermediate apprentice, this isn't normal, right? There's nothing abnormal about it. If he could find a master alchemist to properly utilize the power of the crystal core, the spiritual cost he had to pay would be greatly reduced. It's not that unbelievable for a beginner apprentice to control a quasi-wizard puppet. It's just that with his spiritual power, it's difficult for him to fully utilize the puppet's power. Langdon coldly listened to the conversation between the two and finally spoke. What if these puppets were made by Grimm himself? Felix was stunned. He shook his head and sighed. Then he must be an alchemy genius that only appears once in 100 years. Otherwise, I can't think of any other way to utilize an elemental crystal core to such an extent. As for whether it's true or not, we'll find out next time. He'll come back to the underground eventually, and we'll know when we catch him. Hegel nonchalantly interrupted. That's right, Langdon. Because I accepted your request. My number 7 was unlucky enough to be looted by those bastards from the surface. I'm afraid you'll have to pay for the losses. I hope that when Wizard Perner asks about it, you'll be able to appease his anger. Hearing Hagel's words, Langdon's handsome face twisted again. Chapter 84. Half a day later, Grim and Mary finally returned to the Wizard Tower. Only then did they know that their compulsory mission team had lost another member, Sheila, and the rest of the members were also injured. The team had suffered heavy losses. The cause of all this was the sudden appearance of 4 fallen quasi-wizards. After the sudden attack, Sabrina and the other 2 quasi-wizards fought against 3 of them. But the remaining fallen quasi-wizards still managed to kill Sheila and the other 3 and force them to flee. Sheila died on the way to escape. Since the fallen quasi-sorcerers claimed that they were here to seek revenge on Grim and Mary after they returned to the surface, the members of the team who were still in shock pushed all the blame to the 2 of them. Several senior apprentices had asked them to take responsibility for Sheila's death and take full responsibility for the failure of the mission. When Wizard Angus, who was here to evaluate and receive the mission items, appeared in the hall, Isaac was jumping up and down even more. "Sir Wizard, it's them." They insisted on leaving the team and caused the 4 quasi-wizards to retaliate, which caused our mission to fail completely. "You must punish them." The remaining Leandra and Bruce also cursed loudly, looking indignant. As for the 2 male quasi-wizards in the team, they all had a pale face and did not say a word. Although they would not do anything to hurt others, it was obvious that they were also dissatisfied with Grim and Mary. Due to the difference in level, they had suffered countless losses in the fair battle with the fallen quasi-wizards, and all of them had escaped with injuries. The only one in the whole team who could escape unscathed was probably Sabrina. Wizard Angus sneered, "You don't have to play these tricks in front of me. Every year, there are many apprentice teams who come to the trial and have internal conflicts. I don't care about your little tricks. I only care about what you brought back to the Wizard Tower." Everyone looked at Sabrina at the same time. Sabrina, whose expression was hard to read, opened her hands and handed over the 4 mission items she had. It could be seen that only one of the 4 mission items had been lit up. Only one mission item was completed? Where's the other one? Wizard Angus's face instantly turned cold. "It's here." Mary stepped forward and opened her palm. Over there, a lit-up mission item came into view. "You've only completed 2 out of the 5 missions. According to our agreement, you'll be exempted from the punishment for failing the mission, but don't even think about the reward." Hearing that they could be exempted from the punishment, the high-ranked apprentices in the team couldn't help but relax. However, what Wizard Angus said next shocked them. "In addition, I will announce an internal decision of the Wizard Tower Committee. In view of Grim and Mary's good performance during the elite mission in the training camp, the committee has decided to transfer the 2 of them to the training camp. From now on, they will no longer have to participate in the compulsory missions." Although Wizard Angus's voice was deep and hoarse, in the ears of the team members, it was no less than a bolt from the blue. In an instant, a few of them were shocked out of their wits. How can this be?" Isaac shouted in horror. "My lord, this is unreasonable. Our team only has 8 people left. If you transfer 2 of them away, how are we going to complete the mission? We want to protest." Before he could finish, a black chain suddenly flew out of thin air and tied Isaac up tightly in an instant. "What? There's someone here who dares to question the authority of the Wizard Tower Committee? Kid, let me tell you, no matter what, do not directly challenge the authority and dignity of a wizard. This is to teach you a lesson. Next time, I won't be in the mood to let you go so easily." Following Wizard Angus's cold warning, the black chain suddenly turned red. In an instant, it turned into a scorching hot metal chain, burning Isaac's skin and flesh until it sizzled. When Angus's tone gradually turned high-pitched, the metal chain began to tighten. The red-hot chain had completely sunk into Isaac's flesh, squeezing his bones until they started to creak. Isaac's magic resistance seemed to have suddenly disappeared. He had no way to resist Wizard Angus's fire chain punishment. After a few screams, Isaac fainted from the intense pain. With a snap of his fingers, the fire chain disappeared just as suddenly as it had appeared. Wizard Angus's torch-like eyes swept across everyone. Everyone in the team lowered their heads in pain not daring to look straight at him. This is a small punishment for you. The purpose of you coming here is to train your strength and complete the mission, not to shirk responsibility and cause internal strife. If you're not strong enough to crush those black bastards, then learn to be smarter. Use your schemes and unity to defeat the enemy and successfully complete the mission. Not enough people? Then go to the hall on the first floor and recruit. You can see if there are any idiots who are willing to be hired by you. After finishing his rare long speech, Angus turned his gaze to Grim. Kid, I heard that you're quite good at hiding your strength. Ha! It seems like you also know that keeping a low profile is the most important thing to protect yourself. However, hiding too much is not a good thing. A strong person should have the temperament and dignity of a strong person. If you had shown your strength earlier, maybe this team would have become your underling, and the women in the team would have become your exclusive property. Isn't this more interesting than keeping a low profile? Come on, let me see what you've gotten this time. Ugh. It seemed like this wizard Angus was not a quiet guy, even when he was an acolyte. Grim cursed angrily as he and Mary took out the spoils of war from this trip. 2 people, 2 heads of fallen acolytes, both of which were advanced acolytes. The faces of the team members who had been watching from the side turned extremely ugly. Only wizard Angus laughed out loud with satisfaction. Not bad, not bad. You got underground twice and brought back 2 heads. It's indeed the most suitable talent for spells in the dark underground cave. Kid, you have a bright future. I have high hopes for you. Tell me, what reward do you want to exchange these heads for? Grim was filled with resentment after narrowly escaping death in this underground trip. A rock python that he had just obtained was destroyed in the hands of the enemy. This was undoubtedly a huge blow to him. An elemental crystal core with life energy. It's best if it's an earth element, a quasi-wizard. Grim clenched his teeth. He no longer wanted to hide his talent in making puppets. After all, the appearance of the rock python was enough for people to guess what was going on. If he continued to hide his strength, he might not be so lucky in his next trip to the underground. 2 human heads. You can exchange them for 2 quasi-magus level earth magic cores here. Angus grabbed the 2 human heads and put them into a basin-sized space crack that suddenly opened in front of him. He then took out 2 glowing earth magic cores and threw them to Grim, then turned around and left. After the main character left, the rest of the team looked at each other with an awkward expression. Grim nodded at Sabrina and pulled Mary back to their residence. Grim and Mary were deeply aware of their own shortcomings during this trip to the underground world. Therefore, in the following period of time, the 2 of them were busy with their own things, desperately trying to make up for their shortcomings. What Grim could do now was to eat and drink well every day to build up his body's foundation. Then, he would take a bottle of concentration potion every 3 days to try his best to improve his mental strength. As for the 2 quasi-wizard earth element crystal cores, they were quickly turned into 2 rock python magic puppets. Mary, on the other hand, was deeply aware of her lack of attack power and resistance. Therefore, she spent a large amount of magic crystals to purchase a pair of cruel claws to increase her attack power. This pair of cruel sharp claws was divided into the left and right hands. It was a pair of close-range attack tools. The left hand had the additional effect of tearing, while the right hand had the additional effect of bleeding, which complemented Mary's attributes. If Mary infused her blood energy into the gloves during a battle, she would gain an additional +2 sharpness effect. Mary also spent a lot of time and effort on increasing her magic resistance. If she were to train her magic resistance now, it would take too long, so Mary mainly bought some small accessories to increase her magic resistance. For example, if she had a lightning resistance necklace with +2 lightning resistance on her, she wouldn't have ended up in such a pitiful state of being barbecued. This time, Grim gave all of his magic crystal cards to Mary. She waved her magic crystals and bought a large number of resistance accessories and witchcraft potions in one go. While Mary was squandering her magical crystals, Grim was having a warm and friendly conversation with the cabbie beast in his residence. At this moment, the Kabir still had the appearance of a green-skinned gnome. The only change was that there was a magic collar with faint runes around its neck. This magic collar was a special tool used to imprison subspecies that didn't listen to orders. There was a circle of witchcraft runes etched on the inside of the magic collar. Through 3 thin needles pierced into the target's neck, it slowly absorbed the target's mana to maintain its operation. Any damage to the magic collar would trigger a strong lightning attack, and if the target was too far away from the spellcaster, it would trigger the same effect. The only way to remove the collar was for the spellcaster to activate the witchcraft incantation in a specific order. That was why Grimm put the magic collar on the Kabir as soon as he returned. Only then did he feel relieved. Chapter 85. This was an extremely well-behaved little fellow that was extremely good at reading people's minds. As soon as it entered Grimm's room, it quickly began to do the chores it was supposed to do. It cleaned the room, arranged the books, ink, and quills on the desk, cleaned the traces of spells, and helped Grimm take off the thick traveler's cloak. All in all, he completed all the tasks that a magic servant could do in a short period of time. Then, he bowed his head and waited respectfully by the desk, waiting for Grimm's orders. Grimm watched with a smile as the cabbie beast finished all of this before calmly giving his orders. "Tell me about Lord Pridika." The green-skinned goblin's body trembled slightly. It secretly raised its head to peek at the young acolyte, but it met Grimm's ice-cold and steady gaze. This clearly frightened it, and it hurriedly lowered its eyelids, stammering as it spoke. The situation was similar to what Grimm had expected. The green-skinned goblin named Kabir was indeed a lucky runaway slave, and a very lucky one at that. If he wanted to tell the whole story, he would have to start from 15 years ago. To put it simply, Pridika, a rank 2 magus, had captured a large number of subterranean creatures for some sort of soul experiment, and used them as experimental materials for his spells. Like most magic experiments, this soul experiment was dangerous and difficult to control, so most of the experimental materials died in agony. Only this green-skinned goblin was lucky enough to survive. Regarding the so-called soul experiment, this Kirby didn't have much of a memory left behind, and it wasn't complete either. However, through its simple description, Grimm had reason to suspect that the rank 2 Magus Pridika was attempting to transfer souls. Soul transfer experiments were a necessary part of immortality experiments, so it was something that most magi who dreamed of eternal life would research in private. As for the Magus treasure that the Kirby spoke of, it was just one of the many underground laboratories that Magus Pridika had opened up. Because the Kirby unexpectedly awakened intelligence during the soul experiment and smoothly survived, Magus Pridika promoted it to a personal servant in order to make it easier to observe the changes in its soul. He also passed on some magic knowledge with great interest. It was during this period that Kirby learned those 3 spells. Even though the copy beasts only had basic intelligence, they had their own unique little tricks. The reason why he chose these 3 spells was to make it easier for him to escape. Although it was not as intelligent and knowledgeable as a wizard, it knew that as an experimental subject, it could not escape the fate of being cut into pieces on the operating table sooner or later. Therefore, from the day it awakened its wisdom, it had been preparing to escape at all times. But after listening to Kirby's story, even Grimm could not help but suspect that it was a lucky fellow who was favored by the world's will. After living with the wizard for 11 years, it had finally found an opportunity to escape. 5 years ago, during an underground purge, the Scattered Tower Forest Wizard Association sent a large group of wizards to raid Elysium City. Wizard Pridika was forced to bring most of the fallen wizards to move deeper underground, while the cabbie beast was abandoned in the laboratory. According to normal logic, this cabbie beast would definitely disappear along with Blissful City's self-destruction. Who knew that this lucky fellow would be so lucky, actually escaping before the city was destroyed? Thus, without anyone knowing, the cabbie beast once again became a wild monster that roamed the underground world. As for what happened afterwards, it was easy to speculate. Although the cabbie beast who had mastered a set of strange spells, did not have much fighting strength. It was not something ordinary underground creatures could capture. Thus, after roaming for a period of time, the cabby beast used its abilities to gather a large group of its kind, setting up a camp on the shallow surface of the ground, and became the leader of the green-skinned gnomes. After listening to the cabby beast's story, Grim could not help but sigh inwardly. This was simply an inspirational story from another world. Unfortunately, no matter how beautiful or bizarre the story was, it could not move him. Grim angrily snapped his fingers, and the thin needle in his collar pierced into the cabby beast's neck immediately sent a powerful electric current into its body. In the next moment, the cabby beast's body emitted black smoke, and it fell to the ground, twitching endlessly. Your story is very beautiful and pleasant to listen to. But tell me, what is the benefit of me going through so much trouble to save you? Is it just to listen to your bizarre and twisted *T story? Grim roared at the enraged Grim, looking as if he was going to skin him alive in the next moment. Master, I can give you a grade 2 wizard's witchcraft lab. The cabby beast was indeed a tough cockroach. Even though it had been electrocuted to the point that *its eyes and mouth were crooked, it still managed to say something that could save its life. Where's the laboratory? It's in Blissful City. F***, you damn gnome. Do you think an acolyte from the surface like me can casually enter Blissful City, a place where depraved magi gather? Do you want to have a taste of electric shock? Master, I'm talking about the ruins of Blissful City, not the current Blissful City. The cabby beast was scared half to death by Grim, and its words were practically roaring. Oh, tell me in detail. I don't know the specifics, but the only thing I know is that Blissful City has been destroyed 3 times. Every time magi from the surface charged into the gloomy crypt, Blissful City would be destroyed once, and the depraved magi would choose another place to build a new city. That's why the Blissful City I'm talking about is the ruins of Blissful City that was destroyed in the flames of war, and the current Blissful City was built after that. After experiencing the self-destruction, is there anything left in the ruins? Grim asked, feigning disdain. My lord, the laboratory that Magus Pridicus set up was protected by the tightest spell formation. Even though it couldn't be preserved completely, there are definitely some resources left behind. Even if the amount of resources left behind by a rank 2 Magus isn't much, it's still worth the risk. Grim calmed down. AI, Chip, analyze the veracity of this cabby beast's words. Beep. Analysis of data completed. Preliminary judgment. Veracity. Reference materials. Gloomy crypt events. Secrets of subterranean creatures. Biographies of depraved magi. Additional note. When this creature mentioned the laboratory ruins, abnormal spiritual undulations appeared. Preliminary judgment is that there is something it needs inside. It could also be an opportunity for it to escape from someone else's control. Grim added in his mind. Of course, all of this was a secret that only existed in Grim's mind. On the surface, he was all smiles as he helped the cabby beast up. He even swore that as long as it brought him to the laboratory that might exist, he would definitely give it its freedom and give it a large amount of magic crystals. In order to win over this new subordinate, Grim even ordered 3 meals a day for the nobles for him. Hence, while Grim excitedly enjoyed his magic energy meal, the cabby beast squatted in a corner of the room and wolfed down its food to its heart's content. After both sides reached an agreement, the cabby beast became Grim's servant with unswerving loyalty. And the first thing he did after he took office was to be thrown into the bathroom by Grim to scrub him. In the subterranean world, resources were rare and precious, and the green-skinned goblins did not have the habit of bathing. Hence, the stench on its body was unbearable for Grim. In order to get rid of the stench, Grim even bought a bottle of deodorant and washed the cabby beast from head to toe, inside and out. After doing all this, the cabby beast stood in front of Grim once more. It actually looked a little like the cute green-skinned monster from his previous world. All right, now show me what you've got. Master, which one do you want to see first? It's probably a disguise spell. The cabby beast took out an old wooden stick from its waist and chanted an incantation before tapping it on its body. With a magical glow, the color of the cabby beast's skin became the same as the floor. When it crouched in the corner of the room, it was easy to miss it if one did not look closely. What about the partial transformation spell? Hearing Grimm's words, the cabby beast's ears stood erect and gradually twisted into a withered branch. Although it was not flawless, it was still very convincing, making it difficult to tell the real from the fake. Yes, Grimm nodded. What about the invisibility spell? The cabby beast shook its body and got rid of all the abnormal changes on its body. With a low murmur, the wooden stick flashed, and its body suddenly became illusory and hazy. 5 seconds later, it completely disappeared. Grimm tilted his head to observe. Without elemental vision, if the cabby beast's limbs were a little lighter, the effect of the invisibility spell would be very good. Take 2 steps, and let me see. A line of wet water suddenly appeared on the floor. The cabby beast had just bathed, and this was the remaining water stain on its body. As it moved, Grimm faintly saw an abnormal refraction of light. But as it stopped moving, this abnormal phenomenon disappeared. Here, take this book. Grimm randomly picked up a book and handed it to the cabby beast. At first, the book just floated alone in the air, looking extremely out of place. But after 5 seconds of stillness, even the book gradually began to blur and finally disappeared in midair. Oh, you can make yourself invisible with external objects? Are there any restrictions on these foreign objects? Grimm asked curiously. First of all, they can't be living things. Secondly, they can't be more than 1/5 of my size. The cabby beast's answer did not exceed Grimm's expectations. A spell with such an obvious effect must have extremely strict requirements. Chapter 86. The most orthodox path in front of Grimm was undoubtedly to deepen his understanding of magic spells that were related to his affinity with the fire element. Only these things could help him break through to become a magus in the future. Meanwhile, the demon puppet refinement that was of the greatest help to him right now was no less than a crooked path and belonged to the deviated content. The relationship between them was similar to the relationship between Tao and spells in his previous life. Tao was the path that he had chosen for himself, and it was also the ultimate goal that he was destined to pursue for the rest of his life. Spells were just a method to achieve a small goal, and they were only supplementary methods. Although Grimm had only mastered a few fire element spells, and they were not powerful enough to deal with his current enemies, it was still Grimm's Tao. If he did not want to go astray on the path of a magus in the future, Grimm had to spend a lot of time immersing himself in it, working hard to understand the characteristics and laws of the fire element. Only then could he be considered to have grasped his Tao. As for the magic puppet, it might be able to make Grimm surpass his peers in a short period of time, giving him unlimited glory with its power. However, it was just a method, and his Tao is not compatible. He could use them to fight for power or to fight for resources, but if he wanted to successfully become a magus in the future, he could not abandon the research of fire element spells. For others, it was difficult to balance the path of Tao and spells, and they could only choose one. However, Grimm did not have any objections. After all, with the help of the AI chip, the most time-consuming part of magic research could be done by the AI chip. All he needed to do was wait for the essence of the knowledge to be extracted and integrate it into his own path of magic. That was why the difference between Tao and spells was not so obvious when it came to Grimm. Now that Grimm's power of the will had reached the level of an intermediate apprentice, he could solidify 6 spell models in his spiritual sea. However, only 4 of them had been successfully solidified: Burning Hand, Flame Arrow, Flame Spear, and Flame Shield. As such, it was difficult for him to decide which direction to go with his research on fire element spells. Currently, Grimm had his eyes on 2 spells: Body of Flame and Molten Ball. Body of Flame could allow Grimm's body to contain more fire element and greatly increase his fire resistance. It was also a necessary path for him to modify the fire element. However, in order to master this spell, apart from constant research on fire element spells, he also needed to study body structure and mutation. As the name suggested, Molten Ball condensed a large amount of fire element and earth element together to form a huge fireball with a diameter of 1 meter. When a fireball flew, it could cause earth element damage and cause a knockback effect. Once it was detonated, it would cause a large amount of fire element damage. Thus, it could be considered a dual damage area spell. Molten Flame was a spell that could deal damage with earth element. If one was a spell, it of his would of the magus of him. However, if Grim wanted of him, he could mag off fire of spells of the fire, what would be of fire element and fire element of fire of the element. And of his of mega, he would have magic element of the of fire element of the of his of. Element was to his future. If he had a good foundation, it would be of great help to him in the future. Grim only hesitated for a moment before firmly choosing the body of flame. If it was any other acolyte, they would have to consider the present as well as the future. Body of Flame could improve one's affinity with the fire element and increase one's fire resistance. However, it did not improve the quality of a battle between acolytes. If an acolyte died in a battle with an enemy of the same rank, there would be no future for them. The correct path of magic was there, but in order to survive in the endless battles, many acolytes had to give up on their future and choose to strengthen their combat abilities. However, this problem did not exist for Grim. Due to the existence of the AI chip, the creation of puppets, which were difficult for others to grasp and master, was a walk in the park for Grim. With the protection of the many puppets, he did not have to worry about the threat of his enemies and could optimize his path of magic to his heart's content. Since he had decided to learn Body of Flame, Grim had no choice but to go to the Wizard Tower's library and buy some basic knowledge on body structure and mutation. Fortunately, these were only basic knowledge of necromancy and could be bought with magic crystals. If it involved more advanced spiritual mutation and elemental energy, Grim would have to visit an official necromancer to collect the relevant knowledge. While he was busy, Kirby respectfully held the books his master had bought with both hands and followed behind Grim like a loyal servant. Although the sorcerer apprentices passing by were puzzled by the appearance of a green-skinned gnome in the sorcerer tower, when they saw the glittering golden collar on the cabby beast's neck, they understood its identity. Some acolytes would enslave magical beasts or monsters to make up for their lack of magic. However, most of them were powerful creatures such as nightmares, rock tortoises, scarlet flame tigers, giant eagles, and earth elves. It was rare to see a green-skinned gnome as a servant. As a former servant of a Tier 2 magus, Kabir had seen much of the world. Not only did he not show any fear, but he even took the initiative to bargain for Grim, looking like he was a loyal servant. He even took the initiative to haggle for Grim, taking pleasure in doing so. After experiencing this a few times, Grim was surprised to find that not only did Kirby have a good grasp of the market, it was also very eloquent. It had the potential to become an unscrupulous merchant. After this discovery, Grim decided to let go of the responsibility. Whenever he needed something, he would just give Kirby a list of items and give it his magic crystal card, letting it be in charge of the purchase. Grim locked himself in his room and spent his days studying the sorcery knowledge that the AI chip had given him. In order to increase its enthusiasm, Grim even made an agreement with Kirby. Everything he needed would be paid according to the market price, and the discount that Kirby obtained after bargaining would be its personal reward. With this incentive policy, the Kirby, who had never had his own personal belongings, went crazy in an instant. He immediately became the greatest profiteer in the Magus Tower, spending all day with a group of beginner acolytes, hanging out with them. But it had to be said that this cabby beast really did have its own unique understanding and talent when it came to the changes in the prices of goods. It bought low and sold high, hoarded goods, and drove up prices. These complicated business methods that only humans could grasp were actually learned by it in just a few days. Moreover, It was doing very well and was in full swing. Soon, all the beginner acolytes on the first floor knew about this gnome merchant called Kirby. Not only was it extremely shrewd, it also had some special items that normal people could not get their hands on. This only served to further accentuate its mysteriousness and strangeness. It could not be helped. The two degenerates that Grim and Mary had killed were both high-grade acolytes. Their equipment and magic tools were not something that beginner acolytes could get their hands on. Therefore, when Grim handed all these things over to Kirby, he felt even more confident. That's right. Ever since it made a name for itself in the apprentice market on the first floor, it used the magic crystals it earned to buy itself a new set of equipment. An exquisite and gorgeous magic robe and a full set of glittering magic equipment. Although most of them were low-quality goods for beginner acolytes to try out, a complete set was enough to dazzle the eyes of outsiders. Coupled with the exquisite magic staff and a magic cloak that trailed behind it, whenever it appeared in the apprentice market, it would cause a small wave of greetings. In order to match its style, this fellow even removed the word beast from its name and called itself Kirby, looking very much like a big merchant. The reason why many beginner acolytes chased after it was because of the grade 3 and 4 magic items that it could bring out every few days. These items were not exquisite magic tools that regular acolytes could get their hands on. During this period, there were of course market enforcers who came to collect them. However, when Kirby secretly revealed his master's name, the fellow called Rain could only leave with his tail between his legs. Obviously, Rain was aware of Grim's glory in the training camp through his family. As long as Kirby did not go overboard, he did not want his family to offend an elite acolyte who was rising rapidly. However, regular acolytes naturally did not know about this. On the contrary, Rain's unusual actions made the acolytes even more curious. They all tried to find out who the person behind Kirby was, but no one knew. Therefore, a rumor suddenly appeared in private that this green-skinned goblin called Kirby was the servant of an official magus. Thus, with the help of these strange rumors, business in front of Kirby's stall became more and more popular. Grim, who knew nothing about all this, locked himself in his residence and seriously thought about his future path. Since he had decided to study the body of flame first, there would not be a qualitative improvement in his sorcery power in the short term. If he wanted to maintain his advantage in the Dark Crypt, he would have to fully explore the battle potential of the Crocodile Hunter. As a mount, the Crocodile Hunter's outstanding ability to move through the soil allowed Grim to establish an advantageous position. However, its lack of attack power was still its shortcoming. The Crocodile Hunter was more than enough to deal with an intermediate acolyte, but it was somewhat lacking in strength against a senior acolyte. When it faced a quasi-wizard, its overly loose body structure made it almost vulnerable. At this time, the appearance of the rock python hunter made up for Grim's lack of attack power. A quasi-wizard rock python might not be able to fight against a nimble quasi-wizard, but what about 2? What about 3? Chapter 87. After a period of trial and error, Grim had vaguely discovered a few ways to use the magic puppet. The magic crocodile hunter was a high-grade magic puppet. Every time it was used, it would take up 2 points of spiritual force. This would last as long as the magic puppet was active. On the other hand, a quasi-magus ranked magic puppet like the rock python would take up 3 points of spiritual force. This meant that if Grim fought with all his might, he could only maintain 1 magic crocodile hunter and 2 rock pythons at the same time with his 11 points of spiritual force. Noble headband +1. After all, he still needed to conserve some spiritual force for casting spells. This was after the AI chip's precise calculations and special spell formations had greatly reduced the amount of spiritual force a magic puppet required from the main body to achieve the optimal configuration. If it was a regular magic puppet, Grim's spiritual force would only be able to maintain 1 rock python at most. One of the main reasons for this was due to the demon puppet's characteristics. Magic puppets were different from ordinary golems. Golems were humanoid puppets that had been created using large amounts of precious resources. Due to their huge bodies, there was enough space to carve all sorts of runes and special spell formations on the surface of the golem. Puppets created in this way would naturally have the least amount of spiritual force required to control them. Most of the time, the controller would only need to give the simplest command to the golem, and they would not have to worry about it at all. However, magic puppets were different. Magic puppets did not have a fixed body before they were summoned. Their appearance was similar to a magic summon, but the target of the summon was not a random creature from another world, but a fixed magic puppet. This was also the main reason why magic puppets needed to consume Grimm's spiritual force. Furthermore, magic puppets didn't have the enormous bodies of golems that the creators could use as they pleased. Therefore, to carve sufficient control, spell formations, and energy systems in the narrow space of an elemental crystal core that was as small as an egg or a pigeon's egg, it was simply an extremely harsh torture for the creator's puppet-making ability. Truth be told, it was already an astonishing achievement for Grimm to be able to create such a powerful rock python puppet with the help of the AI chip. Combining their battle prowess, a golem with a special body was undoubtedly much stronger than a temporarily summoned magic puppet. However, from the beginning to the end, Grimm had only created magic puppets and never used the golems. The main reason was that the golems were too big and took up too much space, so they were not easy to carry around. Take the lowest grade clay golem as an example. A clay golem without any magic equipment would weigh 600 pounds, 600 kilograms, and it would stand 8 feet tall. Such a huge clay golem was powerful, but how could Grimm bring it into the battlefield? One had to know that such a big guy was difficult to fold and carry even when not in combat. Moreover, their enormous weight consumed a great deal of magic energy. Thus, it was impossible for them to rely solely on absorbing the drifting magical elements in space to supply their needs in battle. Therefore, golems with fixed bodies could only exist as guardians of wizard towers or magic facilities. They usually stayed motionless in secret spaces to minimize their own magic consumption. When they were needed to fight, the preset warning mechanism would activate them and release them to repel or annihilate the invaders. All of this required the support of the huge energy reserves within the Magus Tower. Therefore, these characteristics determined that Grimm could only rely on his magic puppets to fight. After all, carrying an egg-sized crystal core was much more convenient and hidden than carrying an earth-shaking alchemy puppet everywhere he went. Therefore, in order to maximize the support of his magic puppets, Grimm continued to explore the potential of the magic puppets in battle. At the same time, he worked hard to improve his spiritual force. After all, his spiritual force was related to the number of magic puppets he could use in future battles. Therefore, on the 4th day after safely returning to the Wizard Tower, Grimm worked hard to increase his vitality to 382, and once again took a spirit concentration potion. This time, Grimm's spiritual force increased by 0.70 points, which is a lot less than the 0.75 points he got last time. Continuous use of the same type of magic potion would cause the effect to become weaker and weaker until it was completely ineffective on the target. This was a phenomenon that wizards had long studied, but they could not do anything about it. The main reason for all this was the existence of resistance. When the same type of magic potion was used continuously, it would accumulate in the body, which was difficult to get rid of, and reduce the effect of the same type of magic potion. Although this process was gradual, it was real. Therefore, after taking the spirit concentration potion, Grimm's basic stats were as follows: Strength 4, 12, Agility 4, 35, Vitality 3, 17, Spiritual Force. Compared to the last time, Grimm's spiritual force had increased by 1.07 points. 0.70 points came from the spirit concentration potion, while the other 0.37 points came from the continuous mana meal and daily meditation. Based on preliminary calculations, this increase of 1.07 points was worth around 350 to 400 magic crystals. This made Grimm completely believe that a successful wizard apprentice was indeed built by piles of magic crystals. It was noon. After a hard morning of selling goods, the most successful goblin merchant in the Wizard Tower, Cabby, walked briskly back to his residence. Ever since he made his first bucket of gold from Grimm, Cabby rented a room next to his master's residence as his nest. Every day, he only needed to report to his master about the results of the day, and then he could live a carefree life. He could sleep until he woke up naturally and count money until his hands cramped. To be honest, this kind of comfortable life was the perfect life it had always dreamed of. However, this dream did not come true when he was with the Grade 2 wizard, nor when he roamed the underground. However, due to a strange combination of factors, he realized it after following a wizard apprentice. These days, he was simply crazy, and he was busy all day. During the day, he would spend his time in the apprentice market, using his eloquence and talent to earn a steady stream of magic crystals. After stuffing himself with delicious food that night, he nestled in his simple and crude nest and counted the magical crystals he earned during the day over and over again. It could be said that every night he would hug a pile of magic crystals and sleep sweetly. However, the intelligent Cabby also understood that the one who gave him all this was the mysterious master behind him. Without the mysterious master's financial support and full authority, a green-skinned goblin like Cabby, who was looked down upon by the other wizard apprentices, would not have the right to order around. Don't be fooled by the fact that the apprentices surrounded him every day, whispering sweet nothings, but deep in their eyes, Cabby could still see the unconcealable contempt and disdain. They didn't respect him, but the mysterious master behind him. A clever gnome, no matter how talented he was, if he didn't have a strong master to back him up, the only ending for him was to be trampled on the ground, branded as a slave on his face, and thrown into a dark and damp dungeon. He would have to eat human food scraps all day long while doing hard and tiring work. The reason why Cabby knew all this was because before he was chosen as an experiment subject by the wizard, he lived such a life. Comparing the two, although his current master was not as powerful as the previous one, ever since he fell into such a lifestyle, he never had the thought of escaping. There were even many times when he kept fantasizing about how great it would be if he could maintain such a lifestyle forever. With endless daydreams, Cabby used the rune token and the secret spell runes on his waist to open the door to his room. However, as soon as he stepped into the room, he was hit by a thick stench of blood and staggered. In just one morning, its residence had turned into a bloody and terrifying slaughterhouse. His beloved mysterious master was standing in front of a bloody dissection table, examining a strange body that had been completely dissected with a serious expression. Just by looking at the dissection knife in his hand, the deerskin gloves stained with blood, and the white robe that was splattered with blood, one could tell that he was busy with an autopsy. It seemed that his master was also a novice in the field of biological anatomy. Although he had never dissected a creature himself, after staying in a rank 2 wizard's laboratory for a long time, Cabby had been imperceptibly influenced by what he saw and heard. His knowledge of biological structure and anatomy was far greater than Grimm's. If it had been a skilled necromancy apprentice, he would not have turned a dissection exercise into such a bloody mess. What parts to cut and how to avoid the creature's blood vessels were the basics of a necromancy apprentice. It was impossible for him to make such a mess. That was why Cabby was certain that this was his master's first time dissecting a living creature. As his master's loyal servant, how could he ignore his master's awkwardness? Cabby moved a small wooden stool over and climbed onto it to help his master. He even moved the lizardman's body with his own hands to make it easier for his master's scalpel to cut it. Unknowingly, Cabby had turned into an instructor with good knowledge of witchcraft and began to guide Grimm in his first dissection exercise. Of course, the instructor was patient and the scholar was serious, so neither of them realized that there was anything wrong with this. Thus, with Cabby's help, Grimm successfully completed his first dissection exercise. Grim took off his deerskin gloves in satisfaction and threw them into the dustbin beside the operating table along with his white robe. Only then did green-skinned goblin cabbie realize that he had overstepped his bounds. He hurriedly jumped off the wooden stool and squatted by the side, waiting for his master's punishment. "You've done well today. Looks like you've learned quite a bit from that rank 2 wizard. I'll be relying on you to help me with my anatomy and structure exercises from now on." Grim smiled warmly. "Get up. Do you think that I will punish you for a little vanity when you have done nothing wrong? All right, tidy up this place. It's time for lunch." Grim casually threw away the miscellaneous items in his hands and returned to his residence, leaving behind a dumbfounded cabbie. Looking at the bloody slaughterhouse behind him and inhaling the pungent smell of blood, Cabbie finally understood why his master did not place the dissection table in his room. He was afraid that it would affect his appetite. Chapter 88. The underground world had been very chaotic lately. This was the message that Kevin had passed on to Grim when he visited him. Of course, Kevin's visit this time was not just to tell him this, but to bring along the head deacon of the Lothar Trading Company. Their target was the blood garnets that Grim and Mary had gotten from the number 7 mine. After a few days of appraisal, Grim had determined that these blood garnets were a special kind of magic material. They were mainly used to refine some special wizard tools, and they were not helpful for the magic puppets he needed. Perhaps it was because of this that Grim straightforwardly entrusted the 6 blood garnets in their hands to the Lothar Trading Company to deal with. As for the cost, Grim did not choose magic crystals. Instead, he asked the head deacon to convert all the cost into quasi-wizard level elemental crystal cores. Regarding this point, the chief deacon readily agreed with a smile on his face. Since the head deacon was willing to give away the 6 blood garnets, he had already completed half of his share of resources for this half a year. Moreover, the head deacon did not accept magic crystals and was willing to convert them into elemental crystal cores. This meant that he had successfully negotiated 2 deals. So how could he not be happy? The reason why Grim was so happy was because he had learned that the person behind the Lothar Trading Company was Wizard Angus, who they had been dealing with for a long time. Kevin the Black Hand also belonged to the same family as Wizard Angus, the Byron family. It was because of these 2 factors that Grim did not hesitate to agree to the head deacon's request. It could also be considered as him getting on Wizard Angus' good side. In return, Kevin became even more enthusiastic towards Grim. He secretly told him that if he had any problems that he could not solve, he could choose to visit Wizard Angus. Whether it was the purchase of knowledge or the exchange of resources, Wizard Angus would give him the biggest discount. Therefore, in less than half a day, the quasi-wizard level elemental crystal cores that Grim needed were delivered to him. There were a total of 4 elemental crystal cores, 1 earth, 2 water, and 1 wind. In addition, there was also a general map of the underground world that had been explored in the Dark Crypt. However, considering the changes in the underground, this map was only for reference. It was very difficult to completely match the actual terrain. Grim now understood that for a long time in the future, the only thing that could help him establish an advantage in battle was the large number of devil puppets. The advantages of magic puppets lay in their convenience, concealment, and large numbers. If the situation allowed it, Grim even wanted to build an army of devil puppets that he could command at will. In the future, if he didn't like anyone, he wouldn't even need to do anything himself. With a glance, the demonic puppets would be able to drown the enemy. Of course, such fantasies could only be realized in the distant future. But now, he could only carefully build his own demon puppet squad. That's right, Grim already had a preliminary idea. He would use the various combinations of magic puppets to fully exploit the full power of each type of magic puppet. Recently, he had spent most of his time in the underworld, so he might as well create more earth element mana puppets. But considering the possible changes on the battlefield in the future, he needed to make more preparations. Water and wind were the preparations he had made for the future, especially the wind element mana puppet. With it, Grim would have a free flying pet, and he would no longer have to worry about the long journey. He used the AI chip to scan these elemental crystal cores and let the AI chip tailor-made the most suitable mana puppet design for them. Once everything was carried out in an orderly manner, Grimm picked up the crystal ball and silently examined the information and data within. Within the black curtain, the only thing that could be lit up was the thin layer above. Even the shallowest layer was made up of many twisting and turning tunnels, cracks, secret passages, rifts, and waterways. Countless caves, karst caves, and caverns were dotted here, as many as the stars in the sky. There were as many paths that could be passed between any two locations, though most of them could not be passed by humans. On this map, the space that could be temporarily sheltered was marked in green, and the roads that could be passed through were marked in blue. Amidst the dense and complicated blue and green, there were specks of red light. These were the approximate distribution of underground creatures, races, and monsters that had been discovered. Of course, in this shallow, three-dimensional map of the gloomy region, Grimm could not find any signs related to the ruins of Blissful City. Because of this, Grimm called Cabby over and asked him to point out the location of the so-called Magus treasure on the map. After studying it carefully for a long time, Cabby finally pointed out an area. Grimm did not see any signs related to the city, but he saw a large patch of red light that warned of danger. Some areas in the subterranean world had dangerous, forbidden areas that outsiders did not dare to enter. Usually, acolytes would not be able to withstand the harsh natural environment there, or there would be some extremely terrifying monsters. No matter which one it was, acolytes would have to be careful around dangerous areas. Grimm looked at the glaring red light on the map and could not help but hesitate. From the glaring red light, it was a forbidden area that even quasi-magi would be in danger if they entered. Hence, Cabby did not hesitate to point out this place. Theoretically speaking, there was a reason. Since ancient times, magi liked to build various types of laboratories in their residences. From Cabby's description, it could be seen that the Grade 2 Magus was also an expert in modifying creatures. Once the laboratory was abandoned, the mutated creatures, modified creatures, puppet creatures, or magic energy stored inside could cause irreversible damage to the area. It would be fine if the mutated creatures or modified creatures died, but if a powerful one survived, it would be no less terrifying than a Magus to the acolytes who came to explore. Although Cabby claimed to have grasped some of the secret spells of the secret chamber, the risks involved still made Grimm hesitate. However, just as Grimm was hesitating, Cabby revealed some information that once again strengthened his resolve to give it a try. The Flaming Lord's Scepter. In one of the secret rooms of the Grade 2 Magus, there was actually a Flaming Lord's Scepter. To others, this Flaming Lord's Scepter was only a powerful tool that could summon 3 quasi-magi every day. However, to Grimm, it had another indescribable special use. With Grimm's affinity with the fire element, he could use the Flaming Lord's Scepter to create a portal to the fire elemental plane and obtain a steady stream of fire elemental cores. Once his strength reached a certain level, he could even try to occupy a territory in the fire elemental plane and become a true Lord of the Flames. Putting everything else aside, most of the elemental cores that Grimm had been collecting recently did not come from this plane, but from other elemental planes. The space of the multiverse was huge and deep, filled with various forms of elemental energy, forming a boundless ocean of energy. The many planes were like islands, floating in the ocean of energy in isolation. Every plane was a complete miniature world, with land, mountains, rivers, oceans, skies, and living creatures. Not a single thing was missing. However, as the elemental energy mixed into each plane became unbalanced, the plane itself would also show completely different characteristics of the plane. The plane where the sorcerer world was located was a large plane that was extremely suitable for the survival of living creatures. However, when the control of the plane was grasped in the hands of the rapidly rising sorcerers, the characteristics of the plane had also shifted, leaning towards the chaotic and powerful witchcraft energy. The elemental planes mentioned just now were regions where a single element gathered when they were being nurtured. As such, when these planes grew, they would become single elemental planes. In ordinary material planes, elemental matter was almost balanced. Earth elemental matter gathered together to form the earth, then mountains, hills, plains, and other different landforms. Water elemental matter gathered together to form streams, lakes, rivers, and even oceans. Wind elemental matter brought clouds, rain, thunder, and lightning to the material plane, while fire elemental matter brought lava, volcanoes, and life to the material plane. Only when these elements were combined together would they be able to construct a perfect material world where the heavens and the earth grew and everything flourished. However, the elemental planes were not like this. For example, the fire elemental plane that Grimm yearned for the most had mountains, hills, oceans, and lakes. However, the basic elements that formed them were all fire elemental particles. Over there, the mountains were burning, the oceans were burning, and even the sky was burning. Of course, such a world was not suitable for most living creatures to live in, but it could give birth to fire-type creatures that used fire origin energy as their source of life. Fire spirits, fire giants, lava hounds, fire spirits, fire hawks, molten giants, fire demons, fire elders, flame lords, and flame monarchs. Just like humans, it was a world of fire elemental creatures, and there was a clear hierarchy of power. If Grimm really wanted to achieve something in the field of fire, the fire elemental plane was a large plane that he had to step into sooner or later. At the end of the day, the sorcerer world was just a large plane, and the sorcerers were aggressive by nature. They loved to search for new material planes in the endless sea of stars, then invade and conquer them, and drag them onto the sorcerer world's ever-expanding plane chariot. However, with the cruel and ruthless personalities of the sorcerers, they had long obtained the coordinates to the elemental plane, but no sorcerer had ever dreamed of conquering the elemental plane and turning it into a subsidiary plane of the sorcerer world. The reason for this was that these elemental planes were all terrifyingly huge planes. In terms of power, if the sorcerer world really connected to the elemental plane, the ones who would be the happiest would be the elemental creatures that had no desires. At that time, it would not be the sorcerers happily dividing the resources of the elemental plane, but the countless elemental creatures that would flood into the sorcerer world and expand it into a new elemental plane. Chapter 89. Although there was no way to verify the existence of the Magus' treasure, it was definitely worth the risk. After all, something that a Grade 2 Magus might not be interested in could be a priceless treasure for Grimm, who was struggling to become a Magus. Therefore, after confirming the location of the Blissful City ruins, Grimm began to think about how to get there. From the location shown on the map, the possible location was at the deepest part of the shallow layer of the gloomy crypt. It was less than 17 miles away from the surface, but it was deep in the heart of the rich underground creatures. According to the information on the map, there were several large underground tribes near the suspected location, and there were also many powerful underground creatures roaming around. If he really wanted to explore there, he would only end up as food for those evil and cruel fellows if he did not make thorough preparations. In the past few days, Mary had been busy increasing her strength. She was so busy that her feet barely touched the ground. When Grimm took the opportunity to reveal his plan to Mary, she did not impulsively ask to team up with him. Instead, she calmly told Grimm that she had recently found a way to increase her strength and was working hard on it. It was impossible for her to go out in the near future. Therefore, Grimm naturally handed over control of Kirby to Mary and put her in charge of keeping a close eye on this cunning kid, while he prepared the resources needed for the underground exploration. After everything was ready, Grimm found Kevin and told him that he was going to the underground world to look for some gloomy grass. He then used this as an excuse to sneak into the gloomy crypt. To be honest, the gloomy crypt was not a suitable place for sightseeing. Any sane creature that stepped into the gloomy crypt for the first time would feel extremely depressed. Once they thought about the possibility of thousands of tons of soil and gravel burying them, they would not be able to remain calm like before. In the gloomy crypt, Any irrational actions could expose their whereabouts and attract groups of predators. Grim had gone all out for this underground trip. Apart from the crocodile hunter he was riding, he also had 3 quasi-magus-level rock python devil mantises in his pouch. If he really encountered an enemy that he couldn't defeat, he would just have to risk his life and release all 3 rock pythons. He didn't believe that there would be any enemy that could stop him from escaping. As for the other 2 water and 2 wind crystal cores, Grim was still in the process of refining their spell formations. He would probably have a result after this trip to the underground world. Once they entered the range of the dark crypt, Grim summoned the demon crocodile hunter and sank into the soil, following the direction indicated on the map as they advanced deeper into the ground. Every once in a while, Grim would control the crocodile to emerge from a dark tunnel to confirm the direction he was heading in. Using this method, it only took Grim a little more than 3 hours to reach a depth of about 10 kilometers. But as he went deeper, his speed became extremely slow. Large chunks of metal, ores, and huge rock formations formed an insurmountable obstacle for Grim to overcome as he moved through the mud. In the dark soil, Grim's mental power could only extend to a distance of 10 to 20 meters. It was extremely difficult for him to find a path that led to his destination in such a situation. After running into a wall many times, Grim had no choice but to emerge from another tunnel. It couldn't be helped. In a completely unfamiliar area like this, it was better to use the ready-made tunnels dug by the underground creatures than to randomly run around in the dark. In the dark and damp tunnel, Grim took out his crystal ball and used the locator spell to confirm his location. Then, he slowly walked down the tunnel. Grim was sitting on the back of the demon crocodile, wearing a thick and tough traveler's cloak. He had a noble's head ring on his forehead, and his eyes were hidden behind a pair of strange gnome goggles. Through the dim light vision and the elemental vision that allowed him to see through the source of matter, the tunnel in front of him was a completely different and strange world. The background color of the entire field of view was green. The lighting was slightly dim, but everything could still be seen very clearly. Everything that had the aura of an element would emit a unique elemental halo in his vision. Even if they were hiding behind thick stalagmites or in the cracks of the rock walls, they might be able to hide their figures, but the colorful elemental halo could not be hidden. Based on the strength of the halo in his elemental vision, Grim could determine the strength of the creatures even from a distance. The demon crocodile hunters would attack the weaker ones. With a few mud spears, the hidden creatures would be pierced through and killed instantly. Bright red blood flowed out from their broken bodies, and soon, their last breath of life was gone. When he encountered the stronger ones, Grim would summon his rock python and use its incomparably tough body to crush them into minced meat. Along the way, the scattered underground predators had encountered a monster killer. Before their prey could even approach, they would die mysteriously in their hiding spots. However, the scattered predators were easy to deal with, but the underground tribes that were entrenched in groups of the mountain passes that they had to pass through were difficult to deal with. For example, the tunnels of the gnolls and the lizardmen's lair were places that even Grim did not dare to provoke. Otherwise, if they came out in full force, even if he could defeat them, all the monsters in this area would be alarmed. However, Grim did not know that just as he silently snuck through the tunnels of the gnolls, in the dark and damp shadows that he had just passed through, a hunched and thin figure stood up. It was an old gnoll who had entered the final stages of his life. His skinny body did not have many strong muscles, and an old and simple dark dagger hung at his waist. His hunched old body could no longer be straightened. However, when he squinted his slightly turbid eyes and looked in the direction that Grim had disappeared, a formidable aura spread out, almost causing the air around him to freeze. "Leader, the human is heading towards the ruins." A black shadow suddenly emerged from the darkness. "Let him be. He's just an intermediate acolyte. He can't do much." The old gnoll leader's scarlet eyes lit up like two small flames in the darkness. "If we go any further, we'll be in the lizardmen's territory." These guys have been using their advantage in numbers to stop us from getting close to the ruins. If we let a little bug in, we might be able to cause some trouble for them. Yes, I'll arrange for the brothers at the sentries to let him in." The black shadow bowed and quickly disappeared into the darkness. Grim was still moving slowly in the darkness. He did not know why, but he felt an inexplicable chill down his spine. It was as if a cold wind was penetrating his thick cloak and entering his body, causing him to tremble slightly. Damn it, where did this ominous sign come from? Never before had Grim hated himself for not learning about divination and prophecy. Even if he only learned a little, he could easily predict the direction of danger and make some preventive preparations. Grim had secretly taken out the screaming tree branch to look at it a few times, but he did not find anything strange. This meant that danger was approaching, but it was not directed at him. Could it be that the danger came from within the ruins? Grim was deep in thought as he scanned the endless darkness around him. Logically speaking, with the ability of elemental vision, no elemental user would be able to get close to him without him noticing. In the underground world, apart from the terrifying magical creatures, what other creatures could pose a threat to his life? Grim's mind was racing, and the information of powerful creatures stored in the AI chip flowed through his mind. Suddenly, a few creatures caught Grim's attention. Knoll hunters, lizardmen assassins. This seemed to be their territory, and these two strange creatures did not belong to the category of monsters. This meant that there was no elemental energy in their bodies. However, in the list of dangerous creatures in the gloomy crypt, they were still at the top. This meant that even if they did not rely on elemental energy, they still had formidable combat abilities. Grim's heart sank. Elemental vision could not detect these creatures that relied on their powerful physical abilities, and it was even more difficult to detect them with glimmer vision. Perhaps even Mary's infrared vision would not be of much use. In that case, how should he discover these strange and troublesome fellows? While Grim was panicking, the AI chip finally gave him some useful information. Full vision matching ability. This was a type of spiritual perception that only Grim could use. Every time he moved forward, Grim would be able to store the information of the terrain in his mind using glimmer vision and elemental vision. With the powerful visual matching ability of the AI chip, he would be able to detect the minute differences between the two maps in the shortest time possible. If there was really a cold-blooded assassin hiding beside Grim, as long as it moved along with Grim, the shadowy space it was in would definitely be slightly different from before. These differences could not be detected by the human eye, but it was difficult to avoid the AI chip's full vision matching ability. As long as he could detect them, the threat of the assassins would be reduced by more than 80%. Chapter 90. In the dark, twisted shadows, the crisscrossing stalagmites, rock peaks, and stone protrusions occupied most of his vision. In the spacious and quiet karst cave, even the slightest sound could travel along the twisting and winding tunnels to a very, very far place. Grim perched on the back of the crocodile hunter, a sharp blue light flashing in his eyes. Although the surroundings were quiet, Grim's instinct for danger was already ringing in his ears. It seemed like a large number of enemies had arrived. With a soft sound, a dazzling red flame shield appeared and began to revolve around Grim's body. The AI chip in Grim's mind was busily performing calculations. Countless real-time images were being compared and matched. The AI chip of the fiery eyes found all the minute differences that were hard to discern with the naked eye and marked them on Grim's retina. Grim turned his head and stared at a low-hanging stalagmite on the left side of his path. The shadow there was much thicker than before. With a light stomp of his foot, the native hunter in front of him raised its hand, and a yellow earthen spear condensed in its hand. With a twist of its waist and a powerful throw from the native hunter, the earthen spear turned into a yellow bolt of lightning and pierced into the shadow. In Grim's vision, there was nothing there. There were no elemental reactions or signs of life. However, as the earthen spear pierced into the body, there was a sound of flesh being pierced. Asterisk Poochie asterisk a muffled sound was followed by a mournful hiss that resounded through the silent cave. The shadows flared up, and a humanoid creature covered in greenish-black scales suddenly appeared. The earthen spear pierced through its chest and nailed it to the stone pillar. Warm blood flowed down the earthen spear. The humanoid creature began to struggle with all its might. The more it struggled, the bigger the wound that was torn by the earthen spear, and the more blood gushed out. Asterisk poo. Asterisk the second earth spear flew through the air and pierced through its head. The humanoid creature immediately stopped moving and hung motionlessly on the stone pillar. Only the crisp sound of blood dripping to the ground could be heard in the cave. The next moment, Grim raised his head and looked at the dark ceiling. It was 12 to 13 meters above the ground. Even with Grim's vision, he could only see a blur due to the weak light. However, as the Aborigine hunter hurled 2 earth spears, another skinny and strong humanoid creature fell from above. The 2 spears had pierced through its right chest and left leg, but did not take its life. However, just as it was struggling on the cold floor, the demon crocodile's huge claws suddenly enlarged in front of it. Asterisk dong asterisk the sound of a tomato or watermelon being crushed echoed in the cave. The demon crocodile continued its slow and leisurely advance. When it raised its claw again, the place where the humanoid creature used to be was left with a pile of minced meat that was difficult to identify race and gender. A sharp whistle suddenly sounded in the darkness. When the whistles resounded through the cave, countless shadows began to rapidly approach Grim from the darkness in the distance. There seemed to be more than 100 of them. In the darkness, the sound of bowstrings being released did not stop. The sharp sound of arrows piercing through the air came from all directions, and their target was Grim, who was covered in flames. Oh, get ready for a group fight. Grim did not dare to be careless. He instantly dispersed the flame shield around his body and sank into the demon crocodile's huge body as if he had sunk into a swamp. Asterisk puff, puff, puff. Asterisk as soon as Grim disappeared, the demon crocodile's back where he had been standing was filled with arrows. All the arrowheads flashed with a green light. It was obvious that they were dipped in some unknown poison. The Aborigine hunter that had suffered along with Lin Li was also pierced with arrows, but it did not care at all. It raised its hands above its head and clawed at the air. Every time it did so, an earth elemental spear that was 1.5 meters long was automatically condensed. It even threw its arrows from both sides at the lizardmen hunters who had revealed themselves in the distance. Some were dodged by the hunters and assassins, some exploded on the rocky peaks and stalagmites, and some hit their targets directly, instantly killing them in the shadows. It had to be said that the lizardmen's bodies were too weak and slender. In order not to affect their agility, they did not evolve to have thick, dense scales like those of the larger monsters. Instead, they grew layers of thin, greenish-black scales. As for their purpose, they were only used to prevent the leakage of body heat. This type of evolution allowed them to possess unparalleled stealth abilities in the dark caves, but it also made their defenses weak and vulnerable. No matter which part of their bodies was pierced by the earth spears, it was a fatal wound. Their delicate bodies were not strong enough to withstand such an attack. The poisoned arrows they were used to using were completely useless against a clay sculpture native elemental puppet life form. Left with no choice, the lizardmen hunters pulled out their short daggers and leapt between the rock walls and stalagmites towards the giant demon crocodile that was still advancing. At this moment, the weakness of not having enchanted weapons was obvious. Although the weapons made from special underground metals were unusually sharp, most of them were thin and thin. Such weapons were not enough to break through the demon crocodile's glowing yellow mud armor. Many lizardmen surrounded the demon crocodile and attacked it, cutting the mud armor into pieces. But after a moment, an earthen yellow halo flashed, and the mud armor was restored to its original state. They could not hurt the demon crocodile, but the demon crocodile could hurt them. Although the demon crocodile's attack rate was a little slow, each large area of the earth spears could take away 3 to 5 lizardmen's lives. The demon crocodile was like a giant tank that rumbled forward, while the lizardmen were a group of ignorant natives that wielded bamboo spears and carried bamboo arrows on their backs. The difference in strength between the two sides was not just a little, so it was reasonable for them to suffer heavy casualties. Finally, after more than half of the lizardmen had died, a mournful whistle sounded in the distant darkness. With a low roar, the lizardmen began to retreat. When the demon crocodile's surroundings became quiet again, Grimm's body, hidden under a thick cloak, slowly appeared. He hesitated for a moment, but did not order the demon crocodile to chase after the enemies. It was obvious that the underground tribes here had a strong sense of territory. He had probably been attacked by them because he was too close to their habitat. Now that they had suffered such a great loss, it seemed that they would have to retreat to their nests to defend themselves. But just as Grimm ordered the demon crocodile to continue forward, his sharp hearing picked up the mournful cries of the lizardmen in the distance. It was as if a new war had begun in the darkness. However, Grimm did not dare to be interested in it. He stood on the demon crocodile and looked into the distance for a while before continuing his journey. In the darkness, the old knoll leader was hiding behind a stone pillar, looking at Grimm from afar. His gray, sharp, and thin face was filled with an unconcealable look of surprise. Behind it, a group of nimble gnolls leaped through the dark, rugged caves as if they were flying. They pounced on the lizardmen who had just returned after suffering a great defeat. Both sides fought in the darkness of the rocky peaks and stalagmites. The muffled sounds of sharp daggers slicing through throats could be heard continuously. If this sudden attack was successful, perhaps the damned lizardmen tribe would be driven out of this area and all the benefits in the ruins would belong to the gnolls. However, Great Ear was still worried about the surface apprentice who suddenly broke into the ruins. He waved his hand, and one of his subordinates appeared from the shadows behind him. "Go, inform Cracked Tooth in Blissful City. Tell him to tell the fallen Magus that someone wants to enter the ruins. Tell him that the Gray Ear tribe could not stop the enemy and suffered heavy losses. The Darkscale Lizardmen tribe was exterminated by the enemy." In the darkness, the old gnoll's scarlet eyes shone coldly, and his white fangs made one's heart palpitate. "Yes, your subordinate will go immediately." After bowing slightly, Shadow turned around and disappeared into the boundless darkness. The further he went, the more worried Grimm became. In front of him, behind him, left and right of his body, even above his head and under his feet, the metal content in the rock layer was getting higher and higher, and the soil exposed by the guay fruit was also getting lesser and lesser. This also meant that once he encountered a terrifying enemy here, even he wouldn't be able to escape underground like he did in the past. To him, this was the last piece of bad news that he wanted to hear. But Grimm had to admit that this was indeed a very suitable area for building a city. In the subterranean world, if one wanted to build a city once and for all, other than considering the surrounding biological resources, mineral resources, and water sources, the most important thing to consider was the stability and firmness of the geological structure. It was rare to find a place like this that was surrounded by metal ores and stable rock formations. The presence of mineral resources meant that there would be an endless supply of resources to attract wandering caravans, and the presence of water meant that there would be more lives here. However, these were not as good as having a stable sky. No one would want to be crushed into a meat patty by millions of tons of sand and stones while they were sleeping. That was why Kirby pointed out that this was the ruins of the previous blissful city. Judging from the terrain alone, it made sense. After passing through many habitats of the subterranean races, perhaps they were affected by the defeat of the lizardmen. They gathered in the darkness far away, but they did not impulsively attack. In this dangerous situation, the demon crocodiles finally reached the end of their long journey. Chapter 91. Jungle. There was a jungle underground. The moment he saw the lush forest, Grimm's expression turned sluggish. He first cast a spell to confirm that everything in front of him was not an illusion, but a real underground space. Standing at the entrance of the cave, looking at the vast and lush forest, Grim smelled a strange and twisted scent. He was standing on a demarcation line. Behind him was a dark, heavy, and hard rock layer with a metallic luster. Beyond the demarcation line was ankle-deep green grass, tall trees, and dense vines, rose branches, shrubs, and berries that tightly blocked the road. Through the greenery, Grim could vaguely see the figures of some small animals running quickly in the forest. In the depths of the forest, the leaves swayed, apes cried, and tigers roared. It was an abnormally flourishing forest. But behind this flourishing forest was a strange energy aura that made Grim's heart palpitate. It only took Grim 3 seconds to confirm that this was the ruins of the blissful city that Cabby had described. The source of all this was a large amount of magic energy that leaked out after the Magus Tower was damaged. Every Magus Tower would have an elemental pool as an energy source for magic facilities. But when the Magus Tower was destroyed, the energy would leak out and cause irreversible pollution to the surrounding environment. It was obvious that the strange energy in this area was so dense that it could produce such a huge mutated forest. Yes, this was a mutated forest, not the primitive ones that could be seen everywhere on the surface. Any plant or creature that was infected by such a dense energy aura would grow and mutate rapidly, going against the laws of life and turning into a special species that was completely different from before. That was why the forest in front of him looked normal, but it was all just a disguise. This was already a paradise for magic creatures. Grim took off the thick and stuffy traveler's cloak and wiped the sweat off his face. He took out a water bag to replenish himself, then slowly and carefully walked into the forest on the back of the magic crocodile. From the moment he stepped into the forest, everything around him was no longer trustworthy. This seemingly beautiful and green enchanted forest was actually much scarier and more dangerous than the dark underground tunnel just now. As for what kind of monsters were waiting for him inside, he didn't know. But since he was already here, no matter what was inside, he had to try. It had to be said that with the support of the 3 quasi-magus level rock python devil puppets, Grim had become much bolder. It was undoubtedly very difficult to walk in a forest that had not been colonized. Wild grass and flowers, shrubs and bushes, wild rose vines, and branches of trees stretched out horizontally. These things spread without any pattern and twisted together, almost filling all the gaps in front of the tall, ancient tree. Without the demon crocodile, Grim would not have been able to move an inch. But now, with the huge body and powerful physical strength of the demon crocodile, Grim felt like he had joined a demolition team. He crushed everything in his way and squeezed out a flat road from the impenetrable forest. The wild grass and bushes were crushed into powder by the demon crocodile's huge claws. The tall ancient trees that stood in the way of the demon crocodile were all crushed and broken. For a moment, the ancient trees were broken, the vines snapped, and the sky was filled with colorful leaves. However, behind these ordinary scenes, there were also countless strange scenes that were extremely strange and unusual. Every time the demon crocodile's huge claws crushed a patch of green, there would be countless strange sounds coming from under its claws. It sounded like the cry of a baby, but also like the scream of a strange monster. It was so soft that people almost couldn't hear it. When the demon crocodile lifted its claws, Grim saw a dozen green sprouts in a pit the size of a millstone. The other wild grass and flowers had all been crushed into a pool of green juice. Only these sprouts survived in the entire space. Not only did they survive, but they also curled up like living creatures, forming rows of saw-like teeth. They tightly wrapped around the demon crocodile's claws and madly bit at them. Under their crazy attacks, mud and dirt kept falling, and the demon crocodile's claws were slightly damaged. In front of the demon crocodile, some tall ancient trees pulled out their roots with difficulty and slowly escaped from the demon crocodile's path. But there were always some strange plants that were not afraid of death and continued to attack the demon crocodile. They looked like sunflowers, but the bright yellow petals at the top of the thin stalk had a woman's face in them. Their attack method was very simple. From the mouth of the woman's face, they kept spitting out sticky and stinky venom. Many of the vines hanging in the forest began to twist madly. At the end of the vines, a terrifying mouth opened up, and the edges were filled with terrifying, sharp teeth. If a creature passed by them, they would probably only need to pounce and bite off the creature's head. Grimm's young face showed a look of disgust. The forest was like a giant beast in disguise. When the demon crocodile entered, it immediately triggered all the hidden dangers. If one did not have enough strength and entered this place by mistake, they would probably not even have a corpse left. Imagine, if there was no demon crocodile, perhaps the mutated sprouts hidden in the ordinary green grass would use their leaves to cut the creature's feet, burrow into the creature's body, and enjoy a warm and delicious meal. Those ancient trees that could walk on their own were probably the legendary tree demons. Once they were entangled by their roots, ordinary creatures would only end up with their flesh and blood completely devoured. As for the terrifying plants and the disguised flying serpents, they were just parasites of the tree demons. Although they were not worth mentioning, they had the advantage in numbers. If one were to be entangled by them, it would be extremely troublesome. Grimm raised his head slightly and pointed his finger. A long vine that was hanging down from a tall ancient tree and was about to reach him suddenly burst into flames. In the blazing flames, the vine twisted and struggled violently. The terrifying leaves opened up and let out strange hisses that made people frown. Unfortunately, no matter how crazily it struggled, it could not escape the fate of death. The blazing flames quickly engulfed its body, turning it into ashes that scattered down. Perhaps sensing that the intruder was difficult to deal with, whispers could be heard from the depths of the forest. Countless strange plants began to try their best to escape from the demon crocodile's position. After effectively intimidating these arrogant magical plants, the demon crocodile continued to move forward into the depths of the forest. After they walked for a distance, Grimm turned around and saw that the path they came from was once again blocked by the strange plants that had moved here. It seemed that these magical plants were not willing to let their food slip away and still wanted to devour Grimm's flesh. The next wave of attacks came from the monsters living in a magical forest. Most of the monsters in the natural world were forest beasts. When they absorbed the floating elemental energy in the air, they could evolve into terrifying magical beasts that had the ability to use elemental energy. However, monsters were different from magical beasts. They did not evolve naturally, but were more like monsters that were mutated and polluted by the world. Their species were complicated and their abilities were unimaginable. Until now, there had not been a single wizard who dared to pat his chest and say that he had understood all the types of monsters. It could be said that in every primitive forest, there was a possibility of discovering some new monsters. They were often more terrifying and strange than magical beasts. The first wave of monsters that rushed out of the depths of the forest was a group of mutated coyotes. They had strange dark red calf-like bodies. Most of the hair on their bodies had fallen off, revealing countless hidden abscesses and dark spots. What was even more strange was that they were all two-headed wolves. They had terrifying wolf heads, huge white fangs, green saliva dripping from the corners of their mouths, and a strange fluorescent light lingering in the depths of their mouths. Their movements were strong and vigorous, and their strong bodies were comparable to lions and tigers in the forest. When they rushed out of the forest in groups, chilling wolf howls resounded through the sky. Asterisk puff, puff, puff. Asterisk a series of translucent wind blades and snake-shaped lightning covered the demon crocodile's huge bodies in an instant. Some of these two-headed wolves flew around the periphery, continuously attacking the demon crocodiles with spells. Others howled and rushed to the side of the demon crocodiles, using their sharp claws that were half an inch long and terrifying fangs to attack the mud armor of the demon crocodiles. Grimm's face turned pale. In just one round of attacks, the demon crocodile's mud armor had been largely destroyed. If not for the protection of the native hunters, Grim would have been directly attacked by the enemies. These two-headed wolves were not very strong, at most having the strength of a mid-level apprentice. However, when hundreds of giant wolves converged into a moving army, even a high-level apprentice like the demon crocodile hunter could not hold them off. Grim gritted his teeth and lightly tossed out an elemental crystal core. When it landed on the ground, a rock python that was even more terrifying than the demon crocodiles quickly crawled out of the ground. The rock python's thick body was completely made of rock, and its internal cavity was more than 2 meters in diameter. Such a huge creature nimbly rushed into the wolf pack, instantly setting off a wave of blood in the forest. Chapter 92. In the heart of the jungle was a stretch of rugged and steep ruins of the Wizard Tower, piled with rubble and rubble. The Wizard Tower, which once had 7 floors, was now only left with the bottom 3 floors. The collapsed bricks and stone fragments had buried all the entrances. A large number of wildly growing vines and branches crawled all over the ruins, covering the whole place under a patch of green. Even so, wisps of pale green smoke were still coming out from the pile of rubble, and the magical plants here were much thicker and stronger than the ones in the outskirts. Asterisk dong, dong, dong. Asterisk heavy footsteps came from the end of the street. As a giant crocodile-like creature approached, the green vines that covered the city streets and houses were retreating, revealing traces of human life in the past. Along with the continuous sounds of houses collapsing, an even thicker rock python crushed the remaining houses along the way and slithered over. On its body, there were traces of green acid corrosion, scorch marks caused by lightning, cuts caused by wind blades, and scorch marks caused by raging flames. All these marks were still vivid in his mind, fully demonstrating the hardships and horrors of this 5-kilometer forest road. If not for the AI chip's refinement spell formation on the core of the earth elemental puppet after mastering the basic knowledge of puppet creation, allowing the loose earth elements to condense into hard and dense rock, the demon crocodile hunters would not have been able to kill their way through. It would have been impossible for the crocodile hunters to kill their way through and enter the core area of the Magus Tower ruins. Behind them, there was still an endless stream of magical creatures howling in the forest. But strangely, they seemed to be afraid of the rock python and did not dare to step into the core area of the ruins. Grim furrowed his brows, and a dark cloud appeared on his handsome face. Those magical creatures were not afraid of death and would not allow outsiders to destroy the source of magic energy that could give them a huge boost in strength. That was why they did not dare to chase after them. Not because they were afraid of him, but Grim raised his head and looked at the ruins covered in layers of magical plants, his heart skipping a beat. Could it be that there was an even stronger magical creature inside, and that was why the people outside did not dare to enter its territory? Although this was just a guess, Grim felt that it was the most reasonable answer. Looking at the wisps of pale green smoke, Grim could not help but understand. It seemed that part of the elemental pool in the destroyed Magus Tower had not completely lost its effectiveness. After so many years, it was still operating tenaciously. It was a pity that the elemental energy it gathered could no longer be stored effectively, so it dispersed into this space and brought about such a huge change. "Go dig that place for me." Following Grim's command, the rock serpent swayed its sturdy body and pounced straight towards the collapsed tower. With an explosive sound, a green arrow of light pierced the rock python's forehead. The sudden explosion of green energy quickly corroded the rock python's forehead, leaving behind a fist-sized pit on its forehead. The rock python let out a long and violent hiss as it quickly retracted its body and coiled up in its original spot. Grim's heart tightened. Following the faint fluorescence left by the green arrow of light in the air, he quickly found the attacker. This was a beautiful woman with a pair of transparent wings of light on her back. Her figure was graceful and graceful. She had short, thick green hair, a petite face, and a pair of dark green eyes. Her body was naked, and only a few key parts of her body were covered with bright and alluring rose branches and green vines, barely concealing her charming and gentle spring scenery. She was currently floating above the collapsed Magus Tower, holding a magic bough with strange patterns in her hand, and glaring at him with a face full of anger. Grimm swallowed a mouthful of saliva. In his elemental vision, the intense green elemental glow blinded him. If he didn't adjust the intensity of the elemental feedback, perhaps he wouldn't even be able to look directly at this beautiful, terrifying, and powerful magical creature. Hey, Chip, can you scan the origin and strength of this creature? Beep. Gathering aura. Collected information as follows. Origin of magical creatures. Flower elves 70%, demons 17%, forest fairies 9%. Strength, Magus. Elemental tree, plant. Scan of magic weapon, green magic bow. Able to fire 30 to 40 elemental light arrows. Attack method, single target attack. Also able to fire 8 to 10 elemental light rain. Attack method, though attack 30 to 50 meters. Scan of magic weapon, rose armor. There are 7 mysterious flower branches growing on it. Each branch can withstand 60 points of physical attack and 40 points of elemental attack. When the attack exceeds the tolerance of the mysterious flower branches, they will be destroyed and disappear. Only when all the branches had disappeared would the main body of the monster bear the brunt of the attack. Note, when the mysterious flower branches are destroyed, one will be restored every 5 minutes. Note, fire particles and negative energy can deal double damage to the target. Asterisk hiss. Asterisk as the data flowed into Grimm's mind. He could not help but let out a cold hiss. This was too terrifying. This was a powerful magical creature that had the strength of a magus. Moreover, judging from her powerful aura, she was probably one of the most powerful monsters even among the monsters. Especially when he saw that the magical weapon in her hand had such a powerful area of effect attack. Grimm's mind was in turmoil, and he wanted to retreat. Different from the magical weapons made by acolytes, these magical weapons that grew together with the magical creatures were the most powerful weapons. When sorcerer apprentices were refining magic tools, they were also limited by the lack of materials and resources. It was impossible to completely use the things that were most compatible with their own innate attributes. Therefore, the strength of the magic tools they refined was limited, and they also did not have the ability to grow. The magical weapons that appeared on the magical creatures were mostly made by combining parts of their bodies and rare resources. Not only were they powerful, but they could also grow as their strength increased. Comparing the two, it was clear who was stronger and who was weaker. While Grimm was hesitating, the powerful flower spirit in the air suddenly spoke. Kakik, I didn't think that after so long, there would still be an acolyte who dared to come here to die. Little guy, didn't your mentor tell you that there are some places you shouldn't go? However, it's too late for you to regret now. Obediently offer me your flesh and soul. It's been a long time since I've tasted the deliciousness of human flesh. He. The moment the flower spirit opened its mouth, it revealed a mouthful of sharp teeth that were like saw teeth, fully displaying its terrifying nature as a devil. F*CK. A beautiful woman actually has a rough and wild man's voice. In an instant, the last bit of goodwill Grimm had for it vanished into thin air. However, before Grimm could speak to it, the flower spirit, whose gender was hard to discern, pulled the bowstring with its right hand. Countless green plant energy in the nearby forest quickly gathered on the bowstring. In the next second, thousands of green elemental light arrows rained down like a storm. Grimm's fire shield and the mud armor on the crocodile's body didn't even last 3 seconds before disappearing. If it wasn't for the rock python pouncing over and using its thick body to block Grimm's attack, he would have been turned into a sieve by the green rain of light. Even so, a light arrow still pierced through Grimm's shoulder. The wound was as thick as a finger, and faint green energy was still attached to it, corroding Grimm's flesh. The pain made him sweat profusely. Grimm endured the pain, and a stream of scorching hot flames spurted out from his fingertip, which he then stabbed into his wound. The powerful fire element quickly neutralized the green energy on the wound. Grimm clenched his teeth and poured bottles of potions and ointments on the wound. The dizziness caused by the loss of blood, the weakness caused by the corrosion of the green power, the sharp pain caused by the spontaneous combustion, and the numbness and itchiness caused by the rapid growth of his flesh and blood under the stimulation of the magic medicine. All kinds of strange feelings mixed together and attacked Grimm's heart. Grimm didn't dare to hold back anymore. He crazily threw out the other 2 elemental crystal cores. Following a series of earth-shaking noises, 2 new rock serpents emerged from the ground. Grimm's current spiritual power, and with the +1 boost from the noble headband, his spiritual power could reach 12 points. Summoning a rock serpent required 3 points, and summoning a crocodile hunter required 2 points. With his current spiritual power, he could barely hold on. The crocodile hunter carried Grimm on its back and slowly retreated, while the 3 giant rock serpents pounced on them. They fought against the terrifying flower spirit with their strong bodies and physical attacks. The sky fell, the earth cracked, and the mountains shook. The rock serpents had always been this violent and savage when they fought. Their unscrupulous attacks caused the remnants of the city to be destroyed at an even faster speed. But even so, the 3 powerful rock python devil centipedes couldn't hide the terror of that terrifying flower spirit. Regardless of whether it was a single light arrow or a large area attack, the rock serpent hunter could cause visible damage to the rock serpents. The flower spirit was obviously an agility-type magical creature. It flapped its wings and quickly darted between the 3 rock serpents. No matter how hard the rock serpents tried, they could not touch it at all. Only the large area of sand and stones could cause a lot of damage to it. However, as the rose branches on the flower spirit's body kept blooming, a green light shield emerged and blocked all the physical and energy damage for it. The flower spirit's close combat ability was not weak either. Its slender hands were covered in a layer of green light, and it could easily break the hard rock armor on the rock serpent's bodies, as if the rocks were made of tofu. Chapter 93. The first time, Grimm was defeated by a terrifying Magus-rank flower sprite without any fallen acolytes chasing after him, forcing him to flee the forest in a sorry state. The terrifying flower sprite was obviously a regional monster with a strong sense of territory. Once they left the demonized forest, it would not chase after them. That was how Grimm managed to protect the 3 rock python demon manticores, preventing them from suffering irreparable losses. Glancing back at the lush forest, Grimm's eyes twitched. He ordered the AI chip in a low voice. AI chip, immediately create a mission file on the demonic flower sprite and find a way to defeat or kill it. Beep. Mission accepted. Mission file name, flower sprite. Feasibility plan in progress. Estimated attack strategies that can deal substantial damage to the flower sprite include 1. Curse spells. 2. Attack in a team. 3. Activate the lightning giant plan. 4. Destroy the flower sprite's main body. Grimm knitted his brows and ordered in a soft voice. Explain to me, how practical are these strategies? Beep. First, curse spells. The target, the flower demon, was still a living being. Witchcraft curses could reduce part of its combat ability, which would give the devil python more time to break through its defenses. Second, attack in a team. With the current strength of the team, it was impossible for them to take down this wizard-rank flower spirit. If they wanted to defeat it, they would need to have enough team members to work together and fight against it. Estimated battle strategies are as follows. Third, activate the lightning giant plan. In order to prevent the flower sprite from escaping the rock python manticore's attacks, the team must stay close to it. The team members who can achieve this include Blood Queen Mary and the lightning giant. If the Blood Queen Mary is chosen, the chances of her dying is over 89%, so the lightning giant is recommended. Fourth, destroy the flower sprite's main body. This time, the flower sprite is only a host, and its main body has yet to appear. According to the analysis of the characteristics of this type of monster, as long as we can find the flower sprite's main body, it will lose the energy from the main body, and its battle strength will be greatly reduced. Grimm closed his eyes and listened attentively. After thinking for a while, he asked all sorts of questions. How far have you progressed with the Lightning Giant project? How much longer will it take to complete? Beep. The design of the Lightning Giant has been completed, but we still lack the necessary magic materials. What else is lacking? 5 high-grade, wind, elemental crystal cores. How powerful will the completed Lightning Giant be? According to the level of sorcerer apprentices I've met in the past, the completed Lightning Giant will have the basic strength of a mid-level quasi-wizard. Compared to that of Fu. According to the basic data, the Lightning Giant's completed body fought against Fu 100 times. It lost 73 times, was heavily injured 11 times, and drew 16 times. Based on my initial estimations, the Lightning Giant's complete form can only move around and maintain a suitable attack distance from Fu. Only by using continuous lightning attacks can it possibly deal appropriate damage to the enemy. That means he can't beat a top-level quasi-magus. Grimm pondered for a moment, silently recalling Fu's brief attack. Although the battle was very short with the AI chip's recording, Grimm could clearly feel Fu's terrifying battle prowess, an extremely powerful physique, and a violent and ferocious physical strength. These two traits bestowed Fu with an unparalleled mystical power. With just one strike, he had easily broken through the demonic rock python's basic defense and transmitted a violent and unparalleled power into the demonic rock python's body. If not for that, he would not have been able to destroy the rock python's body with a single punch and directly capture the summoning crystal core. To be honest, although the sorcerer flower spirit was marked as a sorcerer after scanning, Grimm wasn't sure if the flower spirit would be able to maintain its overwhelming power if it were to fight against a Fola. If there was a meat shield like Fu at the front and 4 or 5 quasi-sorcerer apprentices at the back, the chances of winning this battle could still be maintained at 20% to 30%. Of course, if Grimm also sent his 3 rock pythons, the chances of winning would directly increase to 50% to 60%. Therefore, the key to the battle was to effectively deal enough damage to the flower spirit. Otherwise, with just the 3 rock pythons, they would be easily torn into pieces. To increase the battle strength of the team, it was not impossible to ask Fu and the others for help, but that would mean giving away most of the loot. According to Cabby's simple description, there were a few magic treasures that Grimm was determined to obtain. Therefore, after thinking about it, he felt that he could only rely on his own strength. Since he could not ask Fu for help, he could only find something to temporarily replace him. The Lightning Giant plan was a plan that Grimm had tailor-made to strengthen the summoning crystal core after obtaining the core of the Storm Giant. Due to the limited amount of spell formations that could be stored in a single elemental crystal core, it was impossible to add powerful spell formations to it without limit. Therefore, the magic puppets made from quasi-sorcerer crystal cores were a little weak. They could be used to bully lower-ranked opponents, but once they met an opponent of the same rank, they would not be able to display their full strength. Because of this, under Grimm's suggestion, the AI chip strengthened the process of creating magic puppets in a different way. It tried to transfer the spell formations that had previously been etched on a crystal core to another crystal core. When the time came, only one core crystal core would be needed to bear the weight of the main body of the magic puppet, while the other crystal cores would share energy and spell formations to form the key nodes of the new magic puppet. This way, it would be possible to maximize the use of the spell formation space of each crystal core and carve enough strengthening spell formations on them to create an even more powerful elemental magic puppet. Of course, this way, each crystal core would not be able to summon a magic puppet on its own. The core of a quasi-sorcerer storm giant and 6 high-grade wind elemental crystal cores would each have their own functions. The combination of crystal cores and three-dimensional spell formations would be used to construct the lightning giant. However, although this plan had been proposed for half a month, the AI chip had been busy calculating the distribution and connection of the spell formations between the crystal core and the branch nodes and had not submitted a clear design. Since the AI chip had added this line today, it meant that its calculations had come to an end. The design for the lightning giant had been released. After all, this was not a place to stay for long. So, Grimm rested for a while and hurriedly set off on his way back. When he was about to leave, some blind gnolls intercepted him. Grimm, who had been holding back his anger, commanded 3 rock pythons to smash the gnoll's nest into pieces. Facing 3 super monsters that were almost invulnerable to weapons, the gnoll's crossbows, daggers, and short spears were completely useless. If not for Grimm's unwillingness to fight, the famous Grey Ear tribe would have lost 30% of its members in just one wave of attacks. Therefore, when the 2 quasi-sorcerers from Blissful City, Langdon and Felix, arrived in a hurry, what they saw was the Grey Ear tribe and the Lizardman tribe that had been wiped out. Grimm had already left. Listening to the gnoll leader's blood-sobbing story, Langdon, who had a gloomy expression, could not care less about what was going on. Instead, he focused his attention on the magical jungle. There were many strange rumors about that place in Blissful City. His mentor, Blacklight, had also warned him not to have any ideas about the treasures in the abandoned ruins. It seemed that there was something hidden in there. That was why he only knew a little about the magical jungle. He had not explored it in depth. Have you entered the magical jungle before? What's inside? Langdon impatiently interrupted the gnoll leader's crying and asked coldly. He was not a fool. Although many adult warriors of that exterminated lizardman tribe died from elemental attacks, which reminded him of that bastard's clay puppets, the rest of them died from close-range sharp weapons. Besides, he did not believe that the boy from the surface would have the patience to go deep into the lizardman's nest and slaughter the women and children one by one. This was the closest place to the magical jungle. It was very beneficial for the underground races to control the magical materials there. Therefore, it was obvious what role the gnolls played in the extinction of the lizardmen. But at this time, Langdon was not interested in upholding justice. He was only interested in what that bastard had done in the magical jungle. Did that guy accidentally stumble into this place? Or did he have some other purpose in exploring? With this question in mind, Langdon invited Felix to search the magical jungle together. Thus, the 2 self-confident fallen quasi-witches entered the magic forest. But in less than half an hour, the 2 escaped from the inside in a sorry state. While escaping, the 2 of them were riddled with bloody holes caused by light arrows, and the flowing blood was dyed green by the strange and troublesome foreign energy. Along the way, the 2 of them had clearly been attacked by many low-tier magical beasts, and there were many claw marks on their bodies. Felix left a teleportation mark at the edge of the jungle, and then the 2 hurried back to Blissful City. Obviously, they had found some clues in the magical jungle. Inferring from these clues, they concluded that the bastard went straight to the Wizard Tower ruins in the depths of the jungle. And the other party's goal was clear. Obviously, they would not retreat just because of a scary wizard monster guarding the place. So the 2 deduced that the boy most likely retreated and went back to get reinforcements. The reason why they left a teleportation mark was to catch them off guard when the other party returned to the jungle. If they could block their retreat in time, with the number of fallen apprentices and the terrifying monster in the magical jungle, they might be able to wipe out the entire surface team in one fell swoop. Chapter 94. Grimm, who had successfully returned from the underground world, was once again busy. However, it was different from his usual routine. Now, he had more goals when he was busy, and he was more focused. The first thing he did after returning was to visit the Lothar Chamber of Commerce again. When he left, he had 5 high-grade wind crystal cores in his waist pouch. However, such a large purchase also brought a lot of magic crystals to Grimm. More than half of the 3,000 magic crystals he had won from the duel had been spent in the blink of an eye. Now, Grimm's magic crystal reserves had fallen below 800. Considering that he and Mary had become big eaters, they had to keep the magic crystals to support their daily consumption. Therefore, it was urgent to obtain a large amount of magic crystals in a short period of time. After returning from the underground, the three of them, who had temporarily formed an alliance to snatch the treasure, gathered together for a meeting. When Grimm told them about what he saw at the Wizard Tower ruins, Mary and Cabby fell into an inexplicable fear. Wizard-level monsters. Was this something that their small team could handle? Although Mary thought highly of herself, she was still just a high-grade vampire. If she really fought against that terrifying flower spirit, she would probably be killed in seconds. Grimm was still an intermediate apprentice. Although his spiritual force was growing rapidly every day with the help of the magic meal and the spirit concentration potion, he was still an intermediate apprentice. If they really encountered a wizard-level monster, not only would he not be able to help, even the aftermath of the battle could cause fatal damage to it. As for the great gnome merchant Cabby, his unique concealment ability was worth watching, but it wasn't related to combat at all. Therefore, other than the past memories in its mind that could help a little, it really couldn't help with anything else. Seeing the fear on the two's faces, Grimm smiled understandingly and began to calmly analyze the advantages and disadvantages of the enemy. With his guidance step by step, the two gradually overcome their fear of wizard-level monsters and began to carefully plan a plan to defeat the terrifying flower spirit. First of all, the three were certain that if they allowed the flower spirit to maintain its wizard-level strength, the plan to seize the treasure would simply be suicide. Thus, he had to think of a way to weaken that terrifying flower spirit's power. In order to achieve this, there were two ways. One was a witchcraft curse, and the other was the flower spirit itself. As for curses, Grimm could find a way to purchase some cursed wands or single-use magic scrolls. However, it was still unknown whether these inferior goods made by sorcerer apprentices could penetrate the flower spirit's magic resistance, so he could not place too much hope on it. While talking about this, Grimm secretly said that if he could get in touch with Wizard Angus, he might be able to get some wizard-level spell scrolls from him. However, in order to get his hands on an official magus, Grimm had to offer something that could tempt the other party. That was why Grimm had to solve this problem by himself. According to Grimm's speculation, which was actually the AI chip, the main body of the flower spirit was actually the AI chip. It was highly likely that it was hiding near the broken elemental pool. Hence, at this moment, Kirby's usefulness became apparent. Relying on its familiarity with the Wizard Tower, it quickly drew the internal structure and clearly pointed out the location of the elemental pool. According to Kirby's description, the elemental pool was located on the second underground floor of the Wizard Tower ruins. Along the way, it would need to pass through many secret witchcraft doors and spell formations. Although most of these things might have lost their effectiveness, if there were one or two that were still working, it could cause immeasurable damage to Mary's infiltration. Therefore, Grimm requested that Kirby follow Mary into the Wizard Tower ruins. Grimm was very firm on this point, so Kirby could only agree while trembling with fear. In order to achieve the above 2 points, the first prerequisite was that Grimm had to have the strength to fight or deal with the terrifying flower spirit. However, this was extremely dependent on the lightning giant that was about to take shape. Perhaps only when the lightning giant reached the expected height would Mary and Cabby have a little confidence in this treasure-snatching operation. In the following days, Grimm, Mary, and Kirby all became very busy. Grimm spent day and night in the alchemy laboratory, busy creating his new magic puppet. Mary also went out early and returned late, and every time she did so, she would be covered in scars. Even with the outstanding ability of the vampires to suck blood and revive, she still had so many scars. It was clear that the intensity of her training had reached the limit of what her body could withstand. As for Cabby, who was content with a little bit of wealth and was determined to become the greatest goblin merchant, he rarely appeared in the hall on the first floor. Instead, he wore a set of old and tattered thief equipment and spent every day in the witchcraft training room practicing his special skills of hiding himself. As for his original shiny magic equipment, he could only lock it in a wooden box with tears in his eyes. Of course, during this period, Grim and Mary also took the time to participate in an underground raid organized by the training camp. However, after experiencing the painful failure last time, the fallen apprentices had obviously strengthened the defense of the various resource points. This caused the team led by Kevin to fall into an extremely difficult battle. In this battle, when the two quasi-sorcerers in Kevin's team were locked in a fierce battle with the fallen quasi-sorcerers, Grim had no choice but to send out a rock python puppet to defend against the attacks of an extra fallen quasi-sorcerer. In a situation where the number of quasi-sorcerers was not as great as the opponents, and the strength of the high apprentices did not have much of an advantage, Kevin could only helplessly give up on the raid in order to avoid being flanked by the enemies. Facing such an ending, the members of the team were very calm. This was because in their past battles of attrition, this was the normal result. As for Grim's performance in the battle, no one had any objections. With the strength of an intermediate apprentice, he was able to defend against the crazy attacks of a fallen quasi-sorcerer for 15 minutes. Such an achievement would definitely make people speechless. It was also because of his persistence that Kevin's team did not collapse due to the lack of quasi-sorcerers. Otherwise, once the team was broken up, how could those high apprentices dare to guarantee that they would be able to escape? In the dark and gloomy underground tunnels, there were many talented acolytes with wild ambitions. Every year, there would always be more than 10 high apprentices who would silently die in some dark corner of the underground tunnels. Even the death of quasi-sorcerers would occur from time to time. The cause of the destruction of the blissful city by the sorcerers on the surface was that a team of 6 people on the surface had coincidentally encountered a fallen sorcerer while patrolling underground. No one knew the cause of the incident, as 2 quasi-sorcerers and 4 high apprentices had silently died underground. The furious sorcerers on the surface had rushed underground with the help of the sorcerers sent by the Scattered Sorcerer Association in the Tower Forest, forcibly destroying the enemy's stronghold, Blissful City. Unfortunately, the enemy's Tier 2 sorcerer, Pridika, had tactfully detonated his sorcerer tower and escaped from Blissful City with a portion of the fallen sorcerers, avoiding this disaster. Thus, in a few years, a new Blissful City was built. The more they understood about these situations, the more vigilant the elite acolytes were towards large-scale conflicts. Once one side went overboard, it was extremely likely that it would trigger a violent backlash from the other side. In the special environment of the dark underground tunnels, no matter how talented or powerful an acolyte was, once they provoked a sorcerer from the other side, they would only meet their end. Thus, when they had taken the heads of 3 high-level fallen acolytes in one go, Kevin's team was already somewhat jittery. This time, they had been disgraced, which made the 2 quasi-sorcerers in the team heave a sigh of relief. As a passerby in the dark underground tunnels, it was impossible for Grim to stay here for too long. Thus, he had no way of understanding these thoughts. The reason why he had concealed his strength this time was purely due to his lack of stamina and spiritual force. Over the past few days, Grim had once again taken a concentration potion. This time, his spiritual force had only increased by 51 points. On the other hand, his vitality had fallen below 3 points. This caused the chip's evaluation of his body to change from healthy to weak. Left with no choice, Grim could only stop taking the concentration potion and focus on adjusting his body. With his vigorous vitality at the age of 15 and the stimulation of his physical body by his spiritual force, it was normal for his vitality to be around 4 to 5 points. However, this was a common problem for all acolytes who walked the path of the elemental path. Usually, they would only focus on training and cultivating their spiritual force. If they were not meditating, they would study magic or spend long periods of time copying magic books. For the sake of magic experiments, they would spend long periods of time in contact with magic materials that were harmful to their bodies. These bad habits also caused all elemental acolytes to look the same, sickly and skinny. If they could successfully advance to become a sorcerer, They would naturally have a lot of time and methods to find some strange items to fill the gap in their bodies. But now, they could only grit their teeth and endure it bitterly. They even sacrificed their bodies time and time again in exchange for a slight improvement in their mental strength. The failure of the mission did not affect Grimm at all. After returning from the underground tunnels, he continued to dive into the alchemy laboratory. He spent most of his time there, carefully polishing the number one magic puppet that he was looking forward to the most, the lightning giant. Finally, after more than 10 days of suffering, Grimm waved his hand to extinguish the magic flames on the alchemy table. He raised the main crystal core that acted as the carrier of the magic puppet's consciousness and squinted his eyes to carefully examine it. At this moment, he could finally breathe a sigh of relief because Chapter 95. This was a masterpiece that could topple all puppeteers' understanding of art. The dazzling main crystal core was almost transparent under the bright light. The irregular surface of the main crystal core was engraved with dense, thin, spiderweb-like magic veins that looked like the veins of the main crystal core. As the elemental energy around it vibrated, tiny golden arcs of lightning started to appear, swimming around the crystal's smooth surface. Every time it made a circle, it would absorb more lightning elements from the surrounding space, and the golden arcs of lightning would become stronger and stronger. In the end, a blinding lightning storm started to engulf the main crystal core. Although it wasn't powerful, the aura of refinement was shocking. Grimm pinched the main crystal core with 2 fingers. The more he looked at it, the more he liked it. His heart was filled with endless pride. This main crystal core was the key to forming the lightning giant. In order to make space for more refinement and strengthening spell formations, the spell formations that absorbed and stored energy had been transferred to the other 5 wind crystal cores. Even so, when the main crystal core was exposed to the air, the lightning elements were uncontrollably attracted to it, creating the strange scene before him. Grimm put his right hand together, dispersing the chaotic lightning elements. He placed his right hand in front of his forehead, silently connecting to the imprint of consciousness inside the main crystal core. It could be said that the imprint of consciousness on the main crystal core was the most important core spell formation. Grimm had used this imprint of consciousness to obtain control of the future lightning giant. Very smoothly, Grimm's mental power penetrated the imprint of consciousness and resonated with a trace of mental power that was left in it. When this process was completed, the imprint of consciousness on the main crystal core was activated. From then on, no one would be able to take control of it away from Grimm. Of course, this was a necessary process for private puppets. Puppeteers often needed to control golems or puppets, so most of them would change the imprint of consciousness to runes. Puppeteers would make control runes into tokens and amulets that were easy to carry and transfer, and then sell them publicly. Anyone who held the control runes could give orders to golems or puppets. From this point of view, the golems were far less loyal than the demonic puppets. The satisfied Grimm had just returned to the entrance of his residence when he bumped into Mary, who was dragging her tired body back. Although she was wearing a red dress, Mary's body was covered with terrifying scars. Even her pretty and delicate face was covered with wounds. "You? What's wrong?" In the past few days, Grimm had been busy with his magic puppet and did not have time to pay attention to Mary's every move, so he was shocked by her injury. It's just a small injury. That bastard's injuries are worse than mine. If it wasn't for the fact that it could help me master magic battle techniques, I would have sucked it dry long ago." Mary waved her hand fiercely and cursed while gnashing her teeth. Although she sounded powerful, Grimm, who was familiar with her character, dared to say that she would definitely lose in a fight. "Mary, you've been going to the Krila Mountains recently. Can you help me find a suitable opponent to practice with? It's best if it's a quasi-wizard and one that can keep secrets." Grimm said hesitantly, "Your lightning giant is ready." Mary's eyes lit up. "Yes, but I haven't tested it yet. As for its strength, that's good. Let's go and help me get revenge." Mary, who had been living in dire straits recently, always had the flame of revenge burning in her heart. However, the idea of leading a group of people to attack an enemy had never crossed her mind. Hearing Grimm's request, she did not have time to go back to her room to treat her injuries. Instead, she turned around and rushed out of the wizard tower with him. She did not care about the strange gazes of the wizard apprentices around her. As soon as they rushed out of the wizard tower, Mary flapped her wings and transformed into a giant vampire bat. She grabbed Grimm's shoulders and flew into the sky. At this moment, it was already dusk. There was still a trace of fiery clouds in the dark sky. The Krila Mountains in the distance were like a sleeping giant, lying on the edge of the dark sky. Mary was flying towards the depths of the mountains. Since the last time Mary drank Alice's blood, her strength and physique had greatly improved. In the past, it was very difficult for her to fly with Grimm on her back. She almost always glided at the treetops. But now, when she flapped her leathery bat wings with all her might, she brought Grimm almost 100 meters into the sky and flew forward as fast as an arrow. The damp night breeze with a hint of coldness slapped against his face. The strong wind that blew against his face forced Grimm to close his eyes. He had no choice but to put on the gnome engineering goggles again, which made his situation a little better. With the help of the dim light of the goggles, he looked down at the ground. At the edge of the dark forest, there were countless torches in a long line hurrying towards the wizard tower. These should be the exploration teams that went into the depths of the mountains every day to hunt for magic beasts and to search for magic potions. While Grimm was still pondering, Mary had already brought him across the night sky and flew over the heads of the exploration teams. The sky was not completely dark yet. Some of the exploration teams on the ground had obviously noticed the abnormality in the sky. Under their shouts, a few team leaders also raised their heads and looked into the sky. But before they could find the small black dot in the dark sky, Mary had already brought Grimm into the depths of the forest. The place that Mary was heading to was more than 70 kilometers away from the wizard tower. If it was on the ground, it would take at least half a day to cross this part of the forest on foot. But for Mary, it would only take her 3/4 of an hour. This was a small hill near a tall mountain range. Mary brought Grimm to this place and began to slowly descend. On the hill, there was an open space the size of half a football field. Although it was also full of weeds and shrubs, it was scattered all over the place. It was obvious that it had been trampled on by the foot. She threw Grimm on the grass, and the red smoke of the vampire bat exploded. In the blink of an eye, she turned back into Red Mary. "Toriel, you bastard, get out here. I, Red Mary, have come for revenge." As soon as she returned to her human form, Mary put her hands on her waist and roared. Her shrill and sharp voice reverberated in the dark forest, and one could faintly hear the echoes in the distance. What was she doing? At this moment, Grimm's mind was in a mess. He found Mary's actions extremely funny. He had long heard that Mary was looking for suitable opponents to practice her close combat skills. But no matter how urgent she was, she should not have come to such a desolate forest to look for one. What else could she find here other than wild beasts and magic beasts? It couldn't be that her practice opponents were magic beasts, right? Filled with endless imagination, Grimm shook his head and smiled bitterly. He was about to stop Mary's nonsense, but with a deep sigh, a tall and strong figure came out of the forest and appeared on the high hill. Black clouds floated in the sky, and a silver moon emerged from the clouds, shining bright moonlight on the figure of the opponent. It was a well-built man with a well-proportioned body. He had dark green eyes, a cold face, and a full set of green armor. It was obvious that he was a powerful person who specialized in close combat. When he first appeared, he had a gentle smile on his face. It was obvious that he wanted to have a good chat with Mary. However, when he realized that Mary was not alone on the high hill, his expression turned cold. He stared at Grimm from afar, trying to figure out something. "Toriel, I've said it before. If you want me to be your woman, then you have to defeat me sincerely. Today, I've found you an opponent. As long as you can defeat him, I'll agree to your request. How about it? That's not too harsh, is it?" You're not afraid of an intermediate acolyte, are you? Mary shouted with her hands on her waist, completely ignoring Grimm's dumbfounded expression. Since when did Mary have a suitor? From the looks of it, he should also be an acolyte. But why did he live in the wilderness? Looking at his strength, Grimm could not help but furrow his brows. This fellow's spiritual undulations were very strange, but the AI chip's feedback proved that he was a quasi-magus. While Grimm was observing the other party, the man in green armor was also silently sizing him up. You keep saying that you have a man. Don't tell me it's this weak little guy. His spiritual fluctuations are so chaotic. It's probably because he's using drugs to forcefully raise it. His spiritual undulations are so chaotic. It's probably because of drugs. Will he be able to withstand your ecstatic kisses? With his weak body, can he withstand a few of your breaths? The man in green armor became more and more furious as he spoke, and in the end, he was unable to restrain his anger. Oh, a love rival has actually come knocking on my door. Bullsh asterisk T love rival. At most, I have a little ambiguous relationship with Mary. They're not even lovers, so how can I be a love rival? Grimm had a strange smile on his face as he looked at the man in green armor. However, before he could even tease him, the man's body underwent an unbelievable change. The man in green armor's body slowly expanded, causing the loose armor on his body to creak. Countless thick black hairs drilled out from under his skin, and his face began to twist and contort as two sharp fangs angrily emerged from his mouth. The most eye-catching thing was his eyes. The two balls of dark green light grew brighter and brighter until they covered the silver moon in the sky, causing Grimm's heart to feel stifled. Chapter 96. Bloodline Transformation. This was a prospective sorcerer walking the path of a bloodline sorcerer. It would be a lie to say that he was not nervous at this moment. After all, in the eyes of all acolytes, bloodline acolytes were the strongest among their peers. Take this guy in front of him, for example. According to historical records, the giant berserk ape was a powerful magic beast with a life force of rank 5. This meant that as long as this guy continued to purify his giant berserk ape bloodline, he would have the potential to become a rank 5 sorcerer. If he was lucky enough to reach rank 5, he would have to worry about his future. But now, he could fully enjoy the great benefits brought by the bloodline transformation. Strong physique, powerful strength, tall and mighty body, as well as fearlessness towards death, the desire to fight until one's last breath. Under the stimulation of the giant berserk ape bloodline, the green-armored man's consciousness was in a mess. He beat his chest with his giant hands and roared at Grimm. Well, this was probably the only flaw of the bloodline. It was easy to fall into the restlessness of the bloodline and lose the rationality and calmness that acolytes should have. Of course, there were some bloodline fanatics who did not see this as a flaw. From her point of view, the berserk desire for battle could stimulate their desire for battle, allowing them to unleash more power. Compared to this, losing some brains was nothing. Don't you need to prepare? Be careful. This guy will not recognize anyone once he transforms. Mary smiled and left the high hill. I'm looking forward to your next performance. Grimm looked up at the indomitable giant berserk ape and shook his head with a bitter smile. Finally, he took a small leather bag from his waist and threw it on the ground. As the bag opened, a dazzling magic light shone from within. Asterisk whoosh whoosh whoosh. Asterisk 5 sparkling high-grade wind-type crystal cores flew out of the bag and began to slowly condense in the air. As soon as they appeared in the air, an ear-piercing sound of wind suddenly rang out from the high hill. Under the guidance of a mysterious force, a huge amount of wind elements frantically surged towards the motionless elemental crystal cores and began to revolve around them. The wind was invisible. The particles of the wind were also invisible. But when such a large amount of wind elements gathered together, the green whirlpool became visible to the naked eye. The wind element came so quickly that the dark night sky was cut into thousands of strands. The gathered wind elements quickly condensed into a humanoid body and 4 limbs with the 5 wind-type crystal cores as the center. It had a green body and green limbs. After the green giant's body was formed, a new elemental crystal core flew out of the cloth bag and flew into the giant's wide chest. In the next second, a green head squeezed out from the top of the giant's sturdy body. However, his face was rather blurry, with no eyes, ears, mouth, or nose. If the previous 5 high-level wind magic cores were only used to build the body, then this quasi-magus level wind magic core was used to support the body. It was used to build the cyan giant's bones. However, this was not the end. A small sun rose from the cloth bag. The bright and dazzling elemental fluorescence and the crackling lightning barrier. As soon as the last main magic core was integrated into the body of the cyan giant, it brought an indescribable magical change to it. If the giant from before was still lifeless, then at this moment, it was alive. The giant body was 5 meters tall, its skin was green, but its body was covered with a layer of golden armor. Although its limbs were not as slender and flexible as human beings, it had arms, palms, and fingers. When 2 small golden suns appeared on its eyebrows, a magic shield that was purely made of static lightning appeared in its left hand, and a blinding lightning spear appeared in its right hand. Together with the wind vortex shield and lightning armor outside the giant's body, its individual defensive means had reached an astonishing level. The lightning element itself was a mutated branch of the wind element. Therefore, the combination of the lightning element and lightning element was not a problem at all. The 5 wind magic cores scattered on the giant's body and limbs were continuously gathering wind elements, except for a part of the wind element that was condensed into a solid body of wind. The rest of the wind elements were continuously strengthened by the main magic core and then turned into lightning energy, supplying the lightning giant's bottomless demand. The 4 meters tall giant ape and the 5 meters tall lightning giant. These 2 giants were facing each other coldly, with a distance of 30 to 40 meters between them. Although the giant ape that the man in green armor had transformed into seemed to be reckless and violent, when facing a powerful opponent with unknown power, it also showed considerable restraint and seriousness. However, the heavy pressure brought by the lightning giant also stimulated the ape, making it more and more manic. Scorching white smoke puffed out of its thick nostrils, and its huge, millstone-like hands hammered the ground, making loud bangs. Finally, the giant ape could no longer suppress the raging battle intent in its body. It raised its neck and let out a roar that shook the forest, swaying its huge body as it charged forward. Grim kept retreating. While he was retreating, he stared at the berserk ape with blue lights flashing in his eyes. Rows of numbers fell from the top of his head like a waterfall. His eyes were filled with a sea of data. But soon, most of the irrelevant data was discarded, leaving only the AI chip scan of the giant ape's data. Character, Toriel. Gender, male. Sorcerer route, bloodline. Attributes, strength 20 plus 2. Vitality 20 plus 2. Agility 11. Spirit 17 minus 3. Grimm's eyes were filled with awe and envy when he saw the statistics of his body. Strength 20. This kind of strength was probably enough to defeat all the magical beasts in the Cray Mountain Range. Vitality 20. With this kind of physique, even if Toriel did not wear any armor, his physical strength was enough to withstand the attacks of all the ordinary weapons in the world. Those ordinary weapons that did not have extraordinary powers could no longer cause any harm to him. Grimm even suspected that with 20 points of vitality, even if someone really chopped off one of his arms, he would be able to regrow it in a few days. This was because creatures with 20 points of vitality seemed to have the hidden benefit of limb regeneration. Based on the data scanned by the AI chip, Toriel's usual stats should be Strength 18, Vitality 18, Agility 11, Spirit 20. Once he completed the bloodline transformation, his strength and vitality would increase to 20 points, but his spiritual force would drop to 17 points. Perhaps this was one of the flaws of the giant ape's bloodline. Although Grimm's thoughts seemed to take a long time, in reality, it was all done in a flash. While Grimm kept retreating, the lightning giant chose to face the giant ape head-on. With a shake of its hand, the lightning giant threw a lightning spear at the giant ape's broad chest at a speed that the naked eye could not capture. The sudden explosion of a small lightning storm instantly enveloped the giant ape's body. In Grimm's visual projection, the basic strength of this small lightning storm was 21 points. However, this level of lightning damage was not enough to stop a powerful magical creature with 20 points of vitality and strength. Through the transformation, Toriel temporarily gained the incomparably strong body and magic resistance of the berserk ape. Although the crackling electric currents and electric arcs that enveloped his body brought him intense pain, they could not stop him from moving. With a strong gust of wind, the giant ape's huge body broke through the lightning storm and swung its fan-like hand at the lightning giant. Compared to the giant ape's wild strength, the lightning giant was much larger, but it was much more agile. With a slight movement, the lightning giant dodged the giant ape's hand and appeared behind it in an instant. With a shake of its right hand, a lightning whip flew out and wrapped around the giant ape's waist. Violent and ferocious high-voltage electricity instantly passed through the lightning whip to every corner of the giant ape's body, causing it to roar endlessly. The area where the whip wrapped around the ape emitted a burning smell of flesh. The ape's first attack was a failure, and the sharp pain from its body stimulated it even more. It reached out to grab the whip at its waist and tore into pieces with a single tug. The giant ape turned around and punched with both its fists. The fierce fists tore through the air and hit the lightning giant in an instant. Although the lightning giant had double protection from the wind vortex shield and a lightning shield on its left hand, the lightning giant's outer layer of protection was instantly broken under the extreme power of the giant ape. There was a loud explosion. The lightning giant drew a green and white trail in the air and only stabilized itself after flying for nearly 100 meters. At this moment, the front part of its left hand had disappeared, and the golden armor on its chest had a huge dent. Grimm, who had retreated to the edge of the forest in the distance, frowned. Compared to the bloodline transformation that had a physical body, the lightning giant's body that was condensed from the wind element was too weak. It was obviously at a disadvantage in close combat against such a big fellow that relied mainly on strength and physical strength. However, with the two external layers of protection, the lightning giant's iron fist did not penetrate the lightning giant's basic defense. Otherwise, it would be much more troublesome to recover. In the blink of an eye, the huge dent on the lightning giant's chest flashed with a golden light, and it returned to normal. At this moment, the furious giant ape once again rushed forward with rumbling footsteps. Don't fight it in close combat. Maintain a distance of 30 to 50 meters and use lightning attacks. Chapter 97. Two giants fighting in a dark, empty, and silent forest. Such a scene had never appeared in Grimm's memory before. But today, it had become a reality in this mysterious and unfathomable world. The gigantic berserk ape was like a bulldozer that never knew exhaustion. It forcefully flattened the nearby mountain forest. Even the ground was filled with deep footprints and fine cracks like spider webs. On the other hand, the lightning giant with a green body and golden armor was like a nimble elf, constantly wandering around the giant ape, provoking it to pounce on it while attacking it with lightning spears and wind blades. As the battle continued, the information Grimm collected about the lightning giant became clearer and clearer. Although he had created the lightning giant himself, he had only been using it as a human-shaped spiritual force projector. He knew nothing about its principles and knowledge. Therefore, the AI chip only had a rough estimate of the lightning giant combat ability and body data. It was far less detailed than the information he had collected from the battlefield. Lightning giant, peak quasi-wizard, lightning, and wind element. Stats: Strength 12, Vitality 11, Agility 18, Spirit 20, Mastered Skills. Wind Vortex, passive. Thunder Armor, passive. Lightning Shield, active. Lightning Spear, active. Lightning Whip, active. Wind Blade, active. Cloud Storm, active. Chain Lightning, active. Lightning Leap, active. This was a long-range magic puppet that mainly relied on agility. Although its strength and vitality were a little weak, its numerous attack skills made up for these shortcomings. It became the most powerful elemental magic puppet under Grimm's command. The strength it displayed did not disappoint Grimm's expectations. In the following battles, the lightning giant relied on its agility to move around the giant ape, constantly attacking it with lightning spears and wind blades. No matter how angry the giant ape pounced, it could not catch up to the lightning giant. After the giant berserk ape's pounce failed, it quickly revealed its terrifying combat talents, namely Soul, Tearing Roar, and Rock Toss. The former could make use of a violent roar to instantly stun the enemies around it, causing them to be in a soulless state for 3 to 5 seconds. Of course, this skill could also instantly kill any ordinary person without the protection of witchcraft. The range of the skill was 50 meters. The second skill allowed the giant ape to condense an irregular rock with a diameter of 2 meters between its palms, and then instantly throw it at its opponent. The tremendous force added to it was enough to easily smash the tall body of the lightning giant that it was so proud of. Although the berserk giant ape's bloodline abilities were rare, they complemented its powerful physique. Any enemy who was affected by the soul-splitting roar would not be able to escape the wild and ferocious close-range attack if they were distracted for a moment. But it was a pity that such a spiritual attack was useless against the elemental puppet. Hence, the great berserker ape could only follow behind the lightning giant in a futile attempt. It kept pouncing on the lightning giant like a madman, knocking down and smashing countless trees, but could not even touch the lightning giant's body. Just when Grimm thought that he would be able to win today's battle, Toriel, who had transformed into a berserk ape, suddenly abandoned the lightning giant that was hard to catch and charged at Grimm with a roar. Cough! Grimm sighed silently. Anyone who could become a wizard apprentice was not stupid. Toriel had been angered by the lightning giant, and the power of his bloodline had muddled his thoughts. Now that his attacks were futile, Toriel regained control of the great ape's body. Of course, he would not foolishly chase after the lightning giant and eat the wind. Instead, he directly targeted Grimm, the instigator of all this. As long as he could take down Grimm, that bastard that was always floating around him would naturally vanish. Even if he could not directly attack Grimm, he could at least lure that bastard to his side. That way, he would be able to unleash his wild strength. With this simple thought, the great berserk ape's eyes turned red. He slammed his fist on the ground and leaped towards Grimm. How could Grimm not see through his opponent's thoughts? The lightning giant's battle strength was indeed outstanding, but it had a fatal flaw. That was because its controller was too weak. And Grimm was the easiest weakness in the great ape's body. Using the lightning giant to block the muzzle was undoubtedly the worst choice. With the giant berserk ape's close combat ability, perhaps it would only take a dozen or so fingers to smash its body into smithereens and damage the elemental crystal core inside. Grimm looked at his stats. Summoning the lightning giant had consumed 7 points of his spiritual force, and he had less than 6 points left. Grimm looked at the ferocious great ape that was pouncing towards him. Feeling the violent tremors under his feet, Grimm threw out another crystal-clear elemental crystal core. "Come out, my rock python nest." Following Grimm's loud roar, the ground in front of him suddenly split open into a bottomless ravine, and a terrifying serpent made of pure rock wriggled out of the ground. The rock python was right in the path of the great berserk ape. Its thick body coiled around the giant ape's body, and its rock-like body quickly coiled around the giant ape's body. In the next second, the terrifying scene of King Kong fighting the rock python unfolded before Grimm's eyes. Unfortunately, the explosive and wild battle did not allow him to watch this cool scene from a close distance. Instead, he had to escape from the terrifying scene as if his life depended on it. Sand and pebbles flew, ancient trees were broken, and grass was scattered. A huge cloud of dust quickly spread in all directions. Countless gravel fragments shot out like bullets, causing the surrounding forest to tremble. When the dust cleared up a little, Grim finally stopped. The green glow of the boots of swiftness on his feet gradually dissipated, and he had already escaped half a mile away. Turning back to look at the battlefield that was shaking the mountains, the lightning giant was standing in the air with both hands raised high. Above its majestic body, a funnel-like, slow-spinning thundercloud was rapidly forming, and the bottom of the funnel was pointing straight at the giant ape that was fighting wildly. Although it was in the middle of a fierce battle, the great ape quickly noticed the abnormality above its head. It tried its best to leave the position locked by the cloud storm, but unfortunately, the rock python that it had smashed into pieces was tightly wrapped around its lower limbs. No matter how hard it smashed it, it would not loosen its grip. Soon, the cloud storm, which had been guided for more than 20 seconds, was finally completed. The dark night sky was suddenly split in half by a huge bolt of lightning that pierced through the heavens and the earth, and the whole world was reflected in a white light. Raging, scorching electric currents wandered wantonly on the ape and the serpent's bodies. The frighteningly powerful lightning energy broke the blood-red life shield around the ape's body and directly sank into the ape's enormous body. In the next second, the violent energy that could not be vented blasted a huge hole in the great ape's thick back. Blood splashed out like a waterfall, but before it could fall to the ground, it was evaporated by the violent lightning energy in the air. Even with the great ape's strong body, it could not withstand such a wild attack. It roared angrily at the sky. Under the continuous attack of the thunderstorm, the giant berserk ape finally turned over and fell to the ground. Its muscular body slowly returned to the form of the green-armored man. Hurry up, hurry up. Let your puppet collect some of his blood for me." It was unknown when Mary had appeared beside Grim, but when she saw the dust settle in the distance, she seemed even more excited than Grim. Grim turned his head and looked at Mary, whose face was blushing. He knew that he had been used by her, but this ending was not bad. She got the blood, and he got the most ideal combat data. Everyone was happy. The only one who suffered was probably the inexplicably powerful prospective wizard Toriel. Grim had no intention of killing Toriel. This was the range of the wizard tower's power. Toriel could live in seclusion here, so he must have a deep connection with the wizards in the wizard tower. It was already too much to beat Toriel half to death for no reason. If he took the opportunity to kill Toriel, Grim was afraid that before he could return to the wizard tower, he would be ambushed on his way back. Grim secretly gave the lightning giant an order, then turned around and began to run away with Mary. His senses were very sharp. From the moment the two monsters started fighting, there were 7 or 8 hidden and powerful mental waves lurking around the battlefield. Among them, there was no lack of mental waves that Wizard Angus was slightly familiar with. Therefore, the lightning giant, who was standing in midair, waved his hand to disperse the gathering cloud storm. He turned into a dazzling ray of lightning and chased after Grim. The rock python that was abandoned on the battlefield struggled to loosen its grip on the unconscious green-armored man. It dragged its broken body across the grass and chased after Grim. No one noticed that before leaving, the rock python had secretly swallowed the soil that was mixed with a large amount of blood under the green-armored man's body. When the battlefield became quiet again, 2 black shadows suddenly appeared beside the green-armored man. After bending down to check, one of the shadows shook his head and sighed. "Toriel is a descendant of your family. What? You just let that kid go like that?" The other shadow was hidden in the thick black smoke. Only 2 clusters of strange fireflies lit up between his eyebrows. He coldly said, "Humph. If it wasn't for Angus, do you think anyone could leave alive after bullying a member of the Wharton family?" "Angus? That's right. He's on duty in the wizard tower these days. Could it be that this kid is a new descendant of his family? The first shadow asked doubtfully. Isn't he afraid of starting a war between the wizard families by letting his descendant go out and cause trouble? That person is not from his family at all. He seems to be a little guy sent here by the Wizard Association to gain experience. There's such a good seedling among the newcomers today. When I finish my witchcraft experiment, I'll have to do a thorough check. The two exchanged a few words, then nodded and parted ways. The first shadow quickly disappeared into the forest, while the other shadow bent down and picked up Toriel. With a burst of black smoke, they also disappeared. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.